The noodles were a cold, greasy knot in the bottom of the styrofoam cup. I stared at them. I think I'd made them an hour ago. Or maybe it was 3. My head was full of cotton, a thick gray fog that muffled thoughts before they could fully form. I tried to remember what I did yesterday. Nothing. Just a blank wall. Must have been tired. I've been tired a lot lately. My keys were on the small table by the door, a cheap brass ring with 2 silver keys. I picked them up, the metal cool against my skin. I set them back down. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache behind my eyes. Losing my mind, I muttered to the empty room. The sound of my own voice was strange. I decided I needed air. Mail. Yeah, I'd check the mail. Something to do. I stood up, my joints cracking in protest. I walked to the table. The keys were gone. I blinked. I'd just put them there. I saw myself do it. I ran my hand over the cheap laminate surface. Nothing. Just dust and a sticky ring from a coffee mug. I checked the floor around the table. My pockets. Empty. A flicker of irritation sparked in the fog. Come on. I turned, scanning the small apartment. Sofa, TV, a coat rack by the door. A dark blue jacket hung from one of the hooks. I never wore that jacket indoors. I walked over to it, the floorboards creaking. I plunged my hand into the right pocket. My fingers brushed against the cold, familiar shape of the keys. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a cold trickle of unease. I hadn't worn this jacket today. I hadn't even been outside. I was sure of it. So how did the keys get in the pocket? Must have just forgot. I said it out loud, but the words sounded hollow, a lie I was trying to sell myself. But the feeling wouldn't go away. A little hook of wrongness, snagged in my gut. What else have I forgotten? Wouldn't go. I pulled the keys out, but my hand brushed against something else in the pocket. A phone. Not my old, cracked one that was probably dead on the counter somewhere. This one was sleek, heavy, modern. I didn't recognize it. My unease grew, coiling in my stomach. I turned it on. The screen lit up with a generic wallpaper of a mountain. No password. I swiped it open. No recent calls, no messages. A clean slate. Like my memory. Forgetting the mail, I started to walk through the apartment. Slowly. This time, I was really looking. The sofa cushions were perfectly plumped, not a single indent where I'd been sitting. The stack of magazines on the coffee table was squared off, the edges perfectly aligned. It didn't look lived in. It looked staged. Who am I? Who lives here? A driver's license and a wallet on the kitchen counter said my name was Alex Mercer. The face in the photo was gaunt, with dark circles under the eyes. It looked like me, but a version of me who had seen something awful. My eyes fell on the bookshelf. It was mostly paperbacks, worn and creased. But one book stood out. A heavy, leather-bound volume with no title on the spine. It was old. Dust puffed up as I pulled it from the shelf. It felt out of place among the cheap thrillers. I opened it. The pages were yellowed and brittle. Tucked between them was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. It was a map, hand-drawn, on what looked like a piece of a paper bag. The lines were messy, frantic. It was a map of this city. I recognized a few of the main streets. But it was covered in small, red X's marking obscure locations. Alleys. A specific bench in a park. A burned-out warehouse by the docks. An underpass. In the bottom corner, a single shaky word was written, remember. Crackle hiss. I jumped, my heart lurching into my throat. The sound had come from the smart speaker on the kitchen counter. It was a burst of static, sharp and loud in the quiet room. Then, silence. Just my own ragged breathing. That was it. I was done. I didn't know what was happening, but I wasn't staying here to find out. This wasn't my home. This was a box. A trap. I bolted for the door. My feet pounded on the floorboards. The hallway blurred. The door. Freedom. My hand shot out, grabbing the knob. I twisted. It didn't budge. I pulled. Nothing. My eyes darted up. A deadbolt. A heavy, industrial-looking thing you'd see on a storage unit. It was thrown. Below it, a thick brass slide lock. Also shot across. And below that, hanging from 2 thick screws, a heavy-duty chain, pulled taut in its channel. 3 locks. All of them engaged. All of them could only be locked from the inside. My blood ran cold. The fog in my head vanished, replaced by a single, screaming thought. These locks weren't to keep someone out. They were to keep me in. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like it was going to break right through my chest. I rattled the doorknob again, a useless, frantic gesture. No, no, no. It was a whisper. I backed away from the door, my eyes wide, scanning the apartment that had suddenly become my prison. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every corner held a threat. I wasn't alone. That static, it wasn't an error. It was a signal. A hello. I needed to hide. The only other door was the bathroom. I scrambled for it, my hands slick with sweat. I fumbled with the knob, swung the door open, and slammed it shut behind me. I twisted the small, flimsy lock on the knob. It clicked into place. I knew it was useless, but it was something. I pressed myself against the door, my back to the cool wood, listening. My whole world had shrunk to this small, windowless room. The smell of bleach and old tile filled my lungs. Silence. A thick, heavy silence. I held my breath, straining my ears. I could hear the frantic drumming of my own pulse in my eardrums. I could hear nothing else. Had I imagined it? Was I just losing it? Juice. Then I heard it. A sound so soft I thought it was the house settling. A light scrape from the hallway. My muscles went rigid. I stopped breathing. It came again. Scrape. Shuffle. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was something else. Something being dragged. Or something crawling. It was moving slowly, deliberately, down the hall. Towards me. My eyes darted around the tiny bathroom. Toilet. Sink. Shower. A plastic bottle of blue toilet bowl cleaner sat on the back of the toilet tank. I snatched it. The plastic crinkled in my white-knuckled grip. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all I had. I held it up, my arm trembling. The shuffling stopped right outside the door. I could feel a presence on the other side. A weight, a pressure. The silence stretched, thinner and thinner, until it felt like it would snap. My gaze was fixed on the doorknob. Any second now it would turn. Any second the flimsy lock would shatter. A soft scratching started on the wood, right at head level. Scritch, scritch, scratch, like fingernails or claws. Slow, patient, exploring the surface of the door, my only barrier. I squeezed my eyes shut. My entire body was shaking. I pressed myself harder against the wall, trying to become smaller, trying to disappear. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Worse than the noise. Complete. I waited. 1 second. 2. 10. A minute. Nothing. No footsteps walking away. No sound at all. It was just gone. Or was it waiting? My whole body was a single, tense wire. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe. Boxed. Boxed. I screamed. A short, choked sound, and nearly dropped the bottle of cleaner. The vibration. It came from my pants pocket. The phone. The strange phone from the jacket. It was buzzing. Ringing. A call. With a hand that shook so badly I could barely control it, I pulled it out. The screen glowed in the dim light. Unknown number. My mind screamed at me not to answer, to throw it, to smash it. But I couldn't. I had to know. My thumb slid across the screen. I brought the phone to my ear. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't say anything. A voice came through the speaker. A woman's voice. Calm. Professional. Almost soothing. Alex? This is Dr. Lena. Are you feeling any better? The world tilted on its axis. My blood turned to ice. She knew my name. Don't forget our session, the voice continued, smooth and even, as if she were confirming a dentist appointment. The map will help you. The phone went dark. I let it fall from my ear, my fingers numb. It hit the tiled floor with a cheap plastic clatter. Dr. Lena. The name meant nothing. A blank. But her voice, it was calm, measured. The voice of someone in complete control. and she knew my name. The scratching outside the door was gone. The shuffling was gone. But the presence was still there. I could feel it, a weight in the air. It was waiting, listening. "The map will help you," she'd said. Not a suggestion, a command, a threat wrapped in a diagnosis. My breath came in ragged bursts in the small, bleach-scented room. My prison. My sanctuary. I looked at the bottle of toilet cleaner in my hand. Useless. I was a cornered animal. The silence outside the door was a physical thing, a wall pressing in. I had to move. I couldn't stay here. Staying here was death. I didn't know who Dr. Lena was. I didn't know who was on the other side of that door. But they had locked me in. And now, they were giving me a key. The map. It was the only card I had to play. A card they had dealt me. My hand trembled as I unlocked the bathroom door. A tiny click in the huge silence. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. I pulled the door open an inch. The hallway was empty. Shadows clung to the corners. The front door stood silent, its 3 locks gleaming under the single hallway light. It felt like a year had passed since I'd rattled its knob. I crept out of the bathroom, my back pressed against the wall, my eyes scanning every inch of the apartment. It was still, lifeless. Staged. The map was where I'd left it, on the heavy, leather-bound book. I snatched it up. The paper felt brittle, fragile. My lifeline. I grabbed the strange phone from the floor, shoved it in my pocket. The blue jacket. The keys. I had to get out. But the locks. I moved to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached for the chain. My fingers hesitated. Was this what it wanted? For me to follow the breadcrumbs? Crackle hiss. The smart speaker on the counter. Louder this time. A jolt went through me like electricity. I stared at the device, a black cylinder of menace. Then a new sound. A metallic click. I spun back to the door. The heavy deadbolt. The one at the top. It was retracting. Slowly. By itself. A low, grinding sound filled the room. Z-Z-Z-Z-T. Clunk. It was unlocked. Then the slide lock below it began to move. Scrape. Clunk. Unlocked. The chain hung slack. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. It was impossible. There was no one there. But the locks were open. All of them. It was letting me go. It was telling me to go. I didn't wait. My hand shot out, twisted the knob. The door swung open. The dim, stale air of the apartment hallway hit my face. I didn't look back. I slammed the door behind me and ran. I pounded down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, not daring to look over my shoulder. I burst out onto the street. The night air was cold. It burned my lungs. I didn't stop running until the streetlights of my block were a distant glow behind me. The first X on the map. A city park, a few miles away. I looked at the hand-drawn lines under a streetlight, my breath still coming in painful gasps. The writing was manic, desperate. Remember. What was I supposed to remember? The park was a dark, gaping mouth. A few lonely lamps cast weak yellow circles on the pavement. The rest was shadow, and the rustle of unseen things in the bushes. The X marked a specific bench, one that sat alone, away from the main path, overlooking a murky, still pond. I felt like a fool. A pawn in a game I didn't understand. The wind blew, cold and sharp. A single dry leaf spiraled down and landed on my shoulder. Pointless, I muttered. My voice sounded thin in the open air. This was a wild goose chase. A way to get me out of the apartment. Maybe the person in the hall was robbing the place right now. I was about to stand up, to just walk away, call the cops, tell them what? That my smart speaker was possessed and my locks unlocked themselves? They'd think I was crazy. Dr. Lena's voice echoed in my head. Are you feeling any better? I brushed the leaf off my shoulder. My fingers scraped against something rough on the wooden backrest of the bench. I leaned closer. It wasn't just weathered wood. There were carvings, scratched deep into the surface. Not initials in a heart. Numbers. A date. 10 to 23. My blood went cold. It was my birthday. October 23rd. RD. Coincidence, I whispered. but the word was a lie. My heart started a low, heavy drumming. My hand went to my pocket, pulling out the strange phone. I switched on the flashlight, its bright, clean beam cutting through the gloom. I ran the light along the bench. The numbers were cut with a sharp, frantic energy, like they were carved with a nail or a piece of glass. My light dipped down into the dark gap between the backrest and the seat. Something was wedged in there, a small, black rectangle. My fingers were clumsy, shaking, as I reached into the grimy crevice. I pulled it out. A USB flash drive. So small. It felt heavy in my palm. 1,000 alarm bells went off in my head. Don't do it. Throw it in the pond. Run. But I couldn't. I had to know. Who am I? What did I do? The phone had a port for the drive. A small adapter was already plugged into it, as if waiting. My thumb hovered over the drive. This felt like a final line to cross. A door I couldn't unopen. I pushed it in. It clicked into place. The phone screen lit up. A single file appeared. A video. No name, just a generic video icon. I pressed play. The image was shaky. The camera was pointed down. I was looking at the ground. Gravel. Cracked pavement. I saw the heels of a pair of men's dress shoes taking steps. Polished, black shoes. The sound was clear. The crunch of gravel underfoot. The distant wail of a siren. The person holding the camera was walking with a steady, unhurried pace. They walked for what felt like an eternity. Then the view tilted up slightly. I saw the dark outline of trees. A weak, yellow lamppost. A park bench. This park bench. The one I was sitting on. The view held on the empty bench for a long, silent moment. Then the camera panned down, as if to put something in the gap between the slats. The video ended. The screen went black. My whole body was rigid. I was staring at the dark screen, my own reflection a pale, terrified mask. Who filmed this? When? My mind was a vortex of questions. I was still staring at my own face on the phone when it buzzed violently in my hand, making me yelp. A new message. On the lock screen. From an unknown number. Did you like your first gift? I snapped my head up. The park was no longer empty. My eyes shot across the dark expanse of grass, scanning the trees, the shadows. There. Under a large oak tree, maybe 100 yards away. A figure. It was just a silhouette against the distant city glow. Tall. Still. Watching me. I couldn't make out a face, or clothes, or anything. It was just the shape of a man, a column of darkness where a person should be. The air left my lungs. My blood turned to ice. It was him, the one from the hallway. He was here. He'd been watching me the whole time. I shot to my feet, the bench scraping against the concrete. The sound was loud in the night. The figure under the tree didn't flinch. It just stood there. Then it took a step forward, out of the shadow of the tree. Another step. It wasn't rushing. It was a slow, deliberate walk. A walk that said, I can take my time. You can't get away. My instincts screamed. Every cell in my body screamed. Run. I turned and bolted. My feet slipped on the damp grass. I scrambled for the paved path, my lungs burning. I didn't dare look back. I just ran. The sound of my own footsteps was a frantic, slapping rhythm. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I imagined his footsteps behind me, that same steady, unhurried pace. Getting closer, I burst out of the park and onto a main street. The sudden glare of headlights, the rush of traffic, the noise of people, it was like breaking the surface of the water after nearly drowning. I stumbled to a stop, leaning against a brick wall, gasping for air, my side a knot of pain. My legs felt like jelly. I risked a glance back. The park entrance was empty. The dark path was deserted. The figure was gone, vanished, as if he was never there. I stood there, heaving, my body trembling. Was it real? Did I imagine it? I fumbled for the phone in my pocket. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen was still on, showing the text message. It was real. It all happened. As I stared at the screen, it blinked. A new notification slid down from the top. An email. My stomach clenched. I opened it. The sender's name made my breath catch in my throat. From Alex. Past. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was just one line. Good. You can still run now for the second location. The taste of metal was still in my mouth. Not from a punch, but from fear. A raw, coppery tang that coated my tongue. The email burned in my mind. Good. You can still run. A compliment from a monster. A commendation from my own past self. The second location wasn't far, according to the crude map on my phone. An industrial park on the edge of the city, a place where businesses went to die. Rusting fences, shattered windows, and weeds growing through cracked asphalt. I walked, not ran. Running felt like playing the game. Walking felt like a protest, a final, useless act of defiance. The address led me to a warehouse. A huge, corrugated metal box bleeding rust down its sides. The name of whatever company used to be here was long gone, just faint outlines of letters against faded paint. A B-movie set. A cliché. I almost laughed. Fuck this, I said out loud. The words were swallowed by the wind whipping through the empty lots. I wasn't going in there. To hell with the map. To hell with Alex. Past. I'd find a cop car, wave it down, and hand them the phone. Let them sort it out. As if on cue, the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen read, Drive Lena. I jabbed the accept icon. What do you want? Alex. Her voice was the same, smooth, unbothered, medicated. Just checking in. How are you feeling after your outing? How do you think I'm feeling? I was chased out of a park by, I don't even know what. I see. You went to the first location. That's progress, she said, as if I'd successfully completed a craft project. It's important to confront these things, Alex. The map is a tool for your recovery. The only way out is through. Are you at the second location now? My hand tightened around the phone. How do you know about that? How do you know any of this? We've discussed this, Alex. Your memory has gaps. I'm here to help you fill them. Facing the past is the only way to heal. This isn't healing. This is a goddamn nightmare. Sometimes they feel the same at first, she said, a beat of silence. Go inside, Alex. We can talk again after. The line went dead. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me. It was a relief. Better than the cold terror. I was a puppet, and every goddamn person with this phone number was pulling a string. Dr. Lena. Alex. Past. The shadow under the tree. All of them. Go inside, I mimicked in a high, mocking voice. I spun toward the warehouse and, with a guttural yell, kicked the large, sliding metal door. My foot connected with a dull, hollow boom that echoed across the empty lot. A jolt of pain shot up my leg, and then, from inside the warehouse, a sound answered. Click. It was small, a dry, metallic sound, like a latch disengaging. I froze, my foot still throbbing. I leaned forward, my ear pressed against the cold, rusty metal. Silence. Just the wind. Had I imagined it? Saw. I walked the length of the door, looking for a way in. A smaller access door was padlocked. The windows were too high, most of them boarded up anyway. But then, I saw it. The big sliding door I'd kicked wasn't flush with its frame. A section near the ground had been bent and pried away, leaving a gap, maybe 2 feet high. A dark, jagged opening. I dropped to my hands and knees on the gritty pavement. I peered through the opening. The darkness inside was total. It smelled of stale oil, damp concrete, and decay. It was a tomb. I was about to back away, to just leave when I saw it. Deep inside, a faint, weak light. It blinked. On, off, on, off. A tiny, rhythmic pulse in the abyss. What the hell? My brain tried to make sense of it. A security system? No, this place was derelict. An alarm panel? My curiosity was a physical itch, a sickness. It overrode the screaming instinct to get up and run. What is that light? The question was a hook in my brain. I had to know. I looked around. The industrial park was a ghost town. No cars. No people. Just me and the box. I got on my stomach, the gravel digging into my palms. I pushed the phone in first, then squeezed my head and shoulders through the gap. The jagged metal scraped my jacket. It was a tight fit. For a second, I was stuck, my hips wedged. Panic flared. I wriggled, pushing with my toes, and then I was through, tumbling onto a dusty concrete floor. I stood up, brushing myself off. The air was thick, heavy. The only light was the faint glow of the city filtering through the grimy high windows, and that other light. The one that had drawn me in. It was coming from the center of the vast, open space. A laptop, sitting on a stack of wooden pallets. Its screen was dark, but a tiny white LED on its casing was pulsing steadily. Like a heartbeat. Who leaves a laptop in the middle of a derelict warehouse? My footsteps echoed as I walked toward it. The space was cavernous, filled with skeletal remains of metal shelving, broken machinery, and piles of debris. I reached the pallets. The laptop was an old model, thick and gray. It was open. The screen was black. I touched the trackpad. The screen flickered to life. There was no desktop, no icons, no wallpaper. Just a black background with a single window open in the middle. An audio player. One file was loaded. It had no name, just a long, flat waveform and a play button. My heart was a heavy drum in my chest. This was it. The next gift. The next piece of the puzzle. I knew I shouldn't. I knew this was a terrible idea, but my hand moved on its own. My finger touched the trackpad. I clicked play. Silence at first. Then the sound of fabric rustling. A man's voice, muffled and panicked, pleading, "Please, no, I have a family. Please don't." Then a different sound. Breathing. A slow, deep inhalation. Ragged. Not panicked, but excited. The man whimpered. And then a voice cut through the air. A voice that was low, cold, and utterly calm. A voice I had heard screaming in my own head just an hour before. It was my voice. "I am Lang. Say N-H-A-N-H, Thoy." The sound of my own words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. I didn't say that. I would never say that. This was a trick. A fake. It had to be. Him! The sound was explosive. The entire warehouse vibrated. I spun around. The sliver of daylight from the gap I'd crawled through was gone. The heavy sliding door had slammed shut, plunging the entire space into absolute darkness, save for the sickly glow of the laptop screen that now seemed to be mocking me. I was trapped. My breath hitched. My mind went white with panic. It's a trap! It's a trap! It's a trap! My eyes darted around the oppressive blackness, trying to find a shape, an exit, but there was nothing. Just the audio file still playing from the laptop. The sound of a struggle, a choked gasp, a wet, sickening thud. I scrambled to the laptop and slammed it shut, killing the light and the sound. Now the darkness was complete. The silence was absolute. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I backed away from the pallets, my hands out in front of me, until my back hit a cold metal support beam of a shelving unit. I slid down to the floor, my legs shaking too much to hold me. I was a rat in a box. Then, a new sound. A low growl. A mechanical groan. V-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-O-O-O-O-M. Two giant, round lights flashed on, 20 yards in front of me. They were blindingly bright, pinning me in their glare. They were the headlights of an old, rusted forklift, the kind with two massive steel prongs sticking out like tusks. Its engine coughed to life with a gargling roar, spewing black smoke that swirled in the beams of light. I stared, mesmerized in horror. There was no one in the driver's seat. The cab was empty. The engine revved, a high-pitched scream of tortured metal. The gears ground with a deafening shriek. And then it moved. It lurched forward, its huge tires crunching over debris. It was coming right for me. A scream tore from my throat. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I dove to the side, behind a tall row of empty shelves. The forklift plowed past where I had been, its steel tusks scraping against the concrete floor with a shower of sparks. It didn't stop. It swung around in a clumsy, brutal arc and came at me again. I ran, deeper into the warehouse. The shelves created a makeshift maze. I was fast, but it was relentless. It was a beast of steel and diesel, and it was hunting me. I ducked into a narrow aisle. The forklift followed, its width barely fitting. It smashed against the supports, sending rusted bolts and metal plates raining down around me. Crash! It slammed into the end of the aisle, right behind me. The entire shelving unit swayed violently. I threw myself forward, crawling over a pile of rotting cardboard boxes as the massive structure came down behind me with a deafening groan of twisting metal. It fell like a domino, triggering the next row and the next. The whole world was a cascade of thunderous, collapsing steel. I just kept moving, scrambling on all fours, dust and rust filling my lungs, the world ending behind me. I burst out into another open area as the last shelf crashed to the floor. I lay on the concrete, heaving, my body screaming with a dozen new pains. I rolled over. The forklift was half buried under a mountain of wreckage. Its lights were still on, cutting through the thick dust cloud. Its engine sputtered, coughed, and then died. Silence. I lay there for a full minute, just breathing. My ears were ringing. Every muscle ached. I pushed myself up. I had to see. I had to be sure. I limped towards the mangled beast, my heart still hammering against my ribs. The dust was settling. I peered through the twisted metal of the cab's frame. The driver's seat was empty. Of course it was. A ghost in the machine, a haunted warehouse. My brain refused to accept it, but my eyes couldn't deny it. Some force, something unseen, had tried to pulverize me. My gaze fell from the empty seat to the floor of the cab. Something was there, lying on the gritty floor mat. It was a doll, a little girl's doll with yellow yarn hair and a simple blue cotton dress. Its plastic head was cracked, and one of its legs was torn off. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the doll's neck. It was bent back at a sharp, unnatural angle, broken. And as I stared at that broken doll, a memory ignited in the black void of my mind. A flash. Not a story, just an image. A little girl with pigtails, clutching a doll just like that one. A doll with a blue dress. A doll with yellow yarn hair. A doll with an intact neck. The little girl was crying. She was my sister. And on the cracked plastic of the doll's face in the forklift, someone had used a black marker to draw a single, glistening teardrop under its left eye. The key ground in the lock with a scraping sound that set my teeth on edge. I stumbled into the apartment, my body a single, throbbing bruise from the warehouse. My shoulders screamed where I had hit the concrete. My lungs were still full of dust and diesel fumes. The memory of the doll, its broken neck, its marker pen tear, was a shard of glass behind my eyes. My sister. I had a sister. The thought didn't bring warmth. It brought a new kind of cold. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. A heavy, satisfying chunk echoed in the small entryway. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Safe. For now. The word was a joke. My hand trembled as I pulled the phone from my pocket. The screen was cracked. I found her number. Dr. Lena. My thumb jabbed the screen. It rang once. Alex. Her voice was a smooth, placid lake. It made me want to scream. A forklift, I said, my own voice a harsh croak. A goddamn forklift tried to kill me. In the warehouse. It turned on by itself. A pause. Not of shock, of consideration. I see, she said. That sounds very distressing. And what do you think it represents, Alex? Represents? It represents a King forklift trying to turn me into paste. What is wrong with you? Did you know? Did you send me there to die? Of course not, Alex. I'm here to help you. The mind can create powerful manifestations when confronted with severe trauma. An empty machine coming to life. It could be a metaphor for your own past actions. A body devoid of you, the conscious you, acting on its own, causing harm. I squeezed my eyes shut. The doll. The little girl crying. There was a doll, I whispered. It looked like my sister's. There, you see? Her voice took on a gentle, triumphant tone. Progress. The map is working. It's unlocking things. Your old self is terrified of being discovered. It's throwing up these violent phantoms to scare you away from the truth. The only way out is through, Alex. You must believe that. I believe I'm going to die. Get some rest, Alex. The fear is just a symptom of the healing. We can talk in the morning. The line went dead. I threw the phone against the couch. Useless. All of them. My past self. A monster. My doctor. A detached observer enjoying the show. I was alone in this. Absolutely alone. I stumbled toward the bathroom, stripping off my scraped, filthy jacket. I had to wash this off. The smell of rust and decay. The feel of it all. I leaned over the sink, turned on the cold tap, and plunged my hands into the stream. I splashed the icy water on my face again and again, the shock of it a welcome distraction. I gasped, water dripping from my chin, and straightened up. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. A stranger stared back. Pale, wild-eyed, a fresh cut on his cheekbone I didn't remember getting. But that wasn't what made my heart stop. On the glass, clouded by the steam of my hot breath, were words, faint but perfectly clear, as if a finger had traced them moments before. You are not me. My blood went cold. I blinked. The words remained. I reached out a trembling hand and wiped the condensation away. The glass became clear, but the words were still there, not on the surface. They looked etched. Inside the glass itself, a faint, ghostly white script that hadn't been there a minute ago, that couldn't be there. The deadbolt was thrown, the security chain was on. I was alone. I was the only one in the apartment. I stumbled back, my bare back hitting the cold tile of the bathroom door. My mind scrambled for an explanation, a trick of the light, a chemical reaction, anything. HIIISSSSSSSS. The sound was explosive in the quiet room. I flinched, spinning around. The showerhead behind me had just blasted to life. A torrent of scalding water hitting the tiled wall and sending a thick cloud of steam billowing into the room. I hadn't touched it. The knob was all the way across the small bathroom. Hiss! From the sink. The faucet I'd just turned off was on again, full blast. Whoosh! The toilet flushed. By itself. Violently. Again and again. Flushing, hissing, steaming. The small room became a chaotic sauna. I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for the doorknob, wrenched it open, and fell out into the hallway, gasping for cool air. But the sound followed me. It was in the kitchen now. A new hiss, louder, from the kitchen sink. I scrambled to my feet and stared in horror as the faucet there turned on, the water splashing hard against the stainless steel basin. Then the TV in the living room flickered on. The screen was a bright, clinical white. It showed a close-up, a surgeon's gloved hand holding a scalpel. The blade pressed against skin. It made an incision. Blood welled up, dark and thick. There was no sound from the TV, just the silent, graphic image of a body being cut open. From the smart speaker on the kitchen counter, a voice began to chant. A flat digital monotone. Let me out, 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 over and over. The hissing of water, the flushing toilet, the silent butchery on the screen, and that dead electronic plea. My apartment, my only sanctuary, had become a symphony of madness. It was alive, and it was screaming. Shut up, I yelled, my voice cracking. I lunged for the kitchen sink, my hand slipping on the wet faucet as I tried to wrench it off. It wouldn't budge. It was like it was welded in place. I gave up, spun towards the bathroom, and slammed the door shut, muffling the chaos from in there. Let me out, let me out. Let me out. The speaker wouldn't stop. The TV kept showing the surgery, the blade cutting deeper. More blood. My head was going to explode. I had to make it stop. I had to break something. I grabbed one of the dining chairs. It was heavy, solid wood. A weapon. My target was the TV, the source of that silent, awful image. I raised the chair high over my head, my muscles screaming in protest. The world narrowed to the glowing screen, the surgeon's hand. I was going to smash it into a million pieces. I took a step forward, swinging the chair down in a furious arc. The screen changed. In the fraction of a second before the chair would have connected, the surgery vanished. The screen now showed a room. My living room, filmed from a high corner near the ceiling, a shaky, distorted wide-angle view. In the center of the frame was a man. Me, wild-eyed, half-dressed, holding a chair over his head, frozen in the middle of a violent swing. It was live. It was me. I froze. The forward momentum of my swing died. My arms went limp. The heavy chair slipped from my grasp and crashed to the floor with a hollow bang. The sound of the falling chair was the only sound. The hissing water had stopped. The toilet was silent. The smart speaker was quiet. The apartment was suddenly unnervingly still. I stood there, panting, staring at the screen, at myself. The camera angle was all wrong. It was from the corner where the wall met the ceiling, a place I never looked, a place where nothing should be. I slowly lowered my arms, my eyes darting from the screen to the actual corner of the room. It was empty. White paint. A cobweb. No lens. No black dot. Nothing. But a camera was there. It was watching me. It had been watching me this whole time. My gaze snapped back to the TV. The image of me was gone. The screen was black. Then a new line of text blinked into existence. Simple, white letters. Enjoying the show? The one who paid for the ticket is watching. Then it blinked one last time and went dark. The apartment was now utterly silent. No water, no TV hum, no digital voice. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. It was a physical presence, a weight in the air. I stood motionless in the middle of my living room for a long time, not daring to move, not daring to breathe. I was a bug in a jar, and somewhere, just outside the glass, and I was looking in. The silence in my apartment after the chaos was worse than the noise. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. I had to get out. The map had one more location marked with a red X, a place I hadn't been yet, a place circled multiple times. I didn't get in my car because Dr. Lena told me to. I got in my car because staying in that apartment felt like sitting in my own coffin, waiting for someone to nail it shut. The thought of that camera, that eye in the corner watching me, made my skin crawl, so I drove. The address on the crumpled piece of paper led me out of the city to the peeling edge of the suburbs where hope went to die. A one-story building sat squat in an overgrown parking lot full of weeds and shattered asphalt. A faded sign on the front read, Northwood Community Clinic. Most of the letters had fallen off. The windows were boarded up. It looked like it had been closed for a decade. I killed the engine. The car ticked and groaned as it cooled. I didn't trust this. I didn't trust Lena. I didn't trust myself. But the image from the TV, the scalpel cutting into skin, was burned into my brain. The doll in the warehouse. The disembodied voice on my speaker. They were all pieces. Maybe the last piece was in there? I shoved the car door open and got out. In the trunk, under a pile of useless junk, was a tire iron. It was heavy in my hand. Cold steel. I clutched it like a lifeline. I wasn't going in empty-handed again. I walked the perimeter of the building. Boarded up windows. A chained front door. It was a fortress. Then I saw it. Around back, half hidden by a dying bush, was a small bathroom window. The plywood covering it had been pried partly open, leaving a gap just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It didn't look forced recently. It looked old. An invitation. A cold breeze drifted out from the opening. It carried a smell that hit me in the back of the throat. Antiseptic. Old, stale, antiseptic. And something else. Damp decay. The smell of a sick room left to rot. I have to know. I tossed the tire iron through the gap. It landed with a dull thud on the other side. I put my hands on the rough edge of the plywood, took a breath, and pulled myself up and through. I landed in a crouch on a grimy tile floor. The air was thick and still. I was in a small, windowless bathroom. I scooped up the tire iron, my knuckles white, my ears strained, listening. Nothing, just the hum of my own blood. I pushed the bathroom door open. It groaned on its hinges. A long, dark hallway stretched out before me. Doors lined both sides, most of them ajar, opening into black squares of shadow. Moonlight struggled through the cracks in the boarded-up windows at the far end, casting long, dusty fingers across the peeling linoleum floor. Every step I took echoed. My own footsteps sounded alien, intrusive. I checked the rooms one by one. Exam rooms with overturned tables. A waiting room with shredded chairs spilling their guts onto the floor. Vandalism. But it felt purposeless. Messy. Then I found the records room. It was different. The damage here was specific. A dozen metal filing cabinets lined the walls. All of them had been ripped open, their drawers hanging out like tongues. Papers were everywhere, a snowdrift of medical histories and private lives scattered and trampled on the floor. All except one. One drawer, in the cabinet farthest from the door, was perfectly closed. It was clean. No dust, and on the front a crisp, new-looking label. The kind you print from a machine. It had one word on it. Alex. My heart hammered against my ribs. What the hell is this? This wasn't vandalism. This was a message. This was for me. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. My voice was a dry rasp. I jammed the hooked end of the tire iron into the gap above the drawer and leaned on it with all my weight. The metal shrieked. It bent, then popped. The lock gave way. The drawer slid open with a smooth, oiled sound. It wasn't full of files. It was full of photographs. Stacks of them. At least 100. All different sizes, some glossy, some matte. I picked up the stack on top. They were pictures of people. A smiling woman pushing a stroller. An old man sleeping on a park bench. A teenager in a football uniform grinning at the camera. A couple laughing on a porch swing. Normal people, living their lives. Every single one of them had their face crossed out. A thick, angry X, drawn in a red marker, viciously scratched into the photograph, sometimes tearing the paper. I flipped through them, my hand starting to shake. Different people, different ages, different places. All of them marked. Judged? Condemned. What was this? A hit list? My eyes stopped on one. A man in his 50s, jogging. He had on a bright yellow sweatshirt. He was looking over his shoulder, a hint of a grimace on his face, like he was tired. There was something familiar about him, the way his hair was thinning on top. The cheap gold watch on his wrist. Mr. Henderson. The name surfaced from the fog in my head. He lived 2 doors down from a house I used to know. He always wore that ugly sweatshirt. Always. As the memory solidified, my phone vibrated in my pocket. The sudden buzz made me jump, dropping a few photos. They scattered at my feet like dead leaves. I fumbled for the phone. A new message. A video. The sender ID made my blood run cold. Alex. Passed. My thumb trembled over the screen. I had to see. I had to know. I pressed play. The video was shaky. It was a first-person view, my view, or the view of the person I used to be. The camera was looking down. I could see gloved hands. In one hand, a scalpel. The blade gleamed under a bright, surgical light. On the table in front of me, him, Mr. Henderson. His eyes were wide with terror. His mouth was covered with a strip of silver duct tape. He was strapped to the table. He was trying to scream, the sound a muffled, desperate whine. The camera, my old eyes, moved closer. The gloved hand raised the scalpel. The blade moved down toward his chest. Toward that ugly yellow sweatshirt. He thrashed against his restraints. I couldn't breathe. A sour taste flooded my mouth. I jammed my fist against my teeth to keep from shouting. I watched as the scalpel pressed against his skin. I watched as it made the first cut. I gagged, stumbling back, dropping the phone. It clattered on the floor, the tiny screen still playing its silent horror show. Slam! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent clinic. It came from the front of the building. The heavy thud of a metal door hitting its frame, followed by a sound that was 1,000 times worse. Click, chunk, the sound of a deadbolt sliding home. The sound of a key turning in a lock. I was trapped. I scrambled for the phone, my mind white with panic. He's here. He was watching me. He let me in, and then he locked the door. My fingers closed around the phone just as the screen went black. Then words appeared. A new text message. From the same number. I see you found our little scrapbook. My head snapped up. I stared into the darkness of the hallway. I wasn't alone. Crackle. Hiss. A sound from above, the intercom system. A speaker on the ceiling crackled to life. A voice came through. It was distorted, warped, and electronic, but underneath the static I recognized the tone, the cadence. It was my voice. Let's play a game, Alex, my own voice taunted, buzzing from the speaker. Hide and seek. Question is, are you the doctor? Or are you the patient this time? Panic took over. Pure animal panic. I wasn't thinking. I was just moving. I burst out of the records room and ran down the dark corridor, away from the front door, deeper into the clinic. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps. Behind me. Heavy. Unhurried. The sound of work boots on linoleum. He wasn't running, he was walking. A calm, measured pace. The sound of a predator that knows its prey has nowhere to go. You can't run from what's already inside you, the intercom voice laughed. My voice. I threw my shoulder into a door on my left. It flew open. I stumbled into a room. A surgical suite. A large operating table stood in the center under a massive, multi-limbed lamp. Stainless steel trays. Glass cabinets full of instruments. The air smelled stronger here. Sharper. The footsteps were getting closer. Thump. Thump. I slammed the heavy door shut and fumbled with the lock. It was a push-button lock on the knob. I twisted it. Heard it click. Not enough. He'll break it down. My eyes darted around the room. A heavy steel supply cabinet stood against the wall. Adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed the edge of it, my muscles screaming. It was heavy. I dug my heels in and pulled. It scraped against the floor, a horrible, grating noise. I grunted, heaving it in front of the door, wedging it tight. Silence. I slumped against the wall, chest heaving, listening. The footsteps had stopped. They were right outside the door. I could feel him. I could feel him standing there, just on the other side of the wood and steel, waiting. I held my breath. My heart was a drum against my ribs. Is he going to break it down? Is this it? The seconds stretched into an eternity. Nothing. Then, crackle. The intercom speaker in the corner of the operating room hissed. I flinched, staring at it. A voice came through. But it wasn't the distorted voice. It wasn't my voice. It was hers. Dr. Lena. Her voice was perfectly clear. Calm. As smooth and placid as a frozen lake. Excellent response, Alex, she said. Flight or fight reflex fully engaged. Stress levels increased by 40%. A pause. Continue observation. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The blood in my veins turned to ice. My eyes were locked on the speaker, on the door. What? What did she just say? But Dermot, this isn't a memory hunt. This isn't my past self trying to kill me. The footsteps outside the door weren't a killer. They were a lab technician. The clinic wasn't a crime scene. It was a maze. I am not the patient. I am the rat. And this whole thing, this entire nightmare, is an experiment. The sound of the lock clicking shut in the clinic was not the end. It was the beginning. My mind replayed Dr. Lena's voice, the calm, clinical words that had shattered my reality. Continue observation. The footsteps outside the door weren't a killer. They were a lab tech. I wasn't a patient uncovering a dark past. I was a rat. Panic tasted like metal. I scrambled back to the operating room window, the one I hadn't noticed before. It was high, but a steel prep table was bolted to the floor beneath it. I climbed onto it, fingers fumbling with the latch. It was stiff with rust. I put my shoulder into it, grunting, pushing. It gave with a groan of tortured metal. I shoved the glass open, a blast of cold night air hitting my face. I didn't look back. I didn't care about the footsteps anymore. I wriggled through the narrow opening, skin scraping against the frame, and dropped. My ankle buckled as I hit the asphalt. A sharp, hot pain shot up my leg, but I ignored it. I limped into the darkness, away from the clinic, away from that building that was a cage built just for me. My car was a beacon for them. They knew it. They were probably watching it right now. I left it there. I ran, a clumsy, hobbling gait, until the squat building was just a dark shape in my rearview memory. I didn't stop until the streetlights of the city proper swallowed me. I couldn't go home. My apartment wasn't a home. It was another room in the laboratory. My phone was a leash. I needed information. I needed a computer that wasn't mine. An hour later, I was hunched in the corner of a 24-hour internet cafe that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The keyboard was sticky. The air was thick with the low hum of cooling fans. I paid cash for 30 minutes. The kid at the counter didn't even look at me. Perfect. I typed her name into the search bar. Dr. Lena Harding. The results were sickeningly normal. A professional-looking website for the Harding Therapy Group. Articles in online psychology journals about innovative cognitive treatments. Photos of her smiling at conferences, shaking hands with other respectable-looking people. No mention of abandoned clinics. No mention of experiments. I read a glowing testimonial. Dr. Harding helped me reclaim my life. I leaned back, the plastic chair creaking. My heart was still hammering, but a cold doubt seeped in. Did I hear her right? Could I have imagined it? The speaker system was old. Maybe it was a crossed wire, a radio signal. Maybe the voice on the intercom was just that, a recorded taunt from my past self. And the footsteps were a real killer, and I had just gotten lucky. Maybe I was just losing my mind. The idea was almost comforting. Insanity felt safer than this. But I couldn't let it go. The calm in her voice. Continue observation. It was too clear. I changed my search terms. Dr. Lena Harding controversy. Harding Therapy Group unethical. Augmented reality therapy. The last one was a long shot. A phrase that had surfaced in one of the articles. Page after page of nothing. Professional listings, positive reviews. My 30 minutes were ticking down. I was about to give up. Then I saw it. A link on the 4th page of results. Purple and old. The title was just a random string of numbers. The preview text was garbled. A dead link. But next to it were the 2 words I was looking for. Cached page. I clicked. The screen refreshed to a stark, text-only layout. A forum. The post was from 3 years ago. The username was anonymous_whistleblower. They call it ART, Augmented Reality Therapy. But it's not therapy. It's psychological torture. Harding's private project. She finds vulnerable subjects, people with trauma, and puts them in a controlled, high-stress simulation. Real locations, real props, hired actors. They use the subject's own memories to build the narrative, blurring the lines so they can't tell what's real and what's part of the, quote, treatment. The goal is to observe stress thresholds. It's sick. It's inhuman. They shut me up when I tried to go public. They ruin people. Don't trust her. Don't. The post cut off. My breath hitched. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was everything. Hired actors. Real locations. A narrative built from memory. The doll. The voice on the speaker. The man in the yellow sweatshirt on the table. It was all a stage. I wasn't a murderer. I was just the star of the show. As I stared at the words, a chill that had nothing to do with the cafe's air conditioning washed over me. The mouse cursor moved. It wasn't me. My hand was hovering over the mouse, frozen. The white arrow slid across the screen, smooth and steady. It was too smooth to be a glitch. It was controlled. It moved to the top of the browser, clicked the X, and closed the window. I was looking at a blank desktop. What the fuck? Cock. My heart slammed against my ribs. I snatched my hand back from the mouse, as if it were red hot. The cursor moved again, gliding to the bottom of the screen. It opened a simple notepad program. A blank white window popped up in the middle of the screen. The blinking vertical line of the cursor pulsed. Once. Twice. Then letters started to appear, typed out one by one, with mechanical precision. DIGGINGTOODEEP My throat closed up. My eyes darted around the cafe. A couple of guys were watching a video on their screen. A girl was typing furiously. No one was looking at me. They were monitoring me. Right now, they saw what I found. Subject A. That's me. I'm Subject A. I shoved the chair back. A loud scrape on the linoleum floor. I had to get out. And then it happened. Click. The screen in front of me went black. At the exact same instant, so did every other monitor in the entire cafe. The guys watching the video cursed. The girl stopped typing. The low hum of 20 computers died at once. For a second, there was only the sound of the whirring air conditioner and confused muttering. "What gives?" someone asked. Then, every screen flickered back to life, in perfect, terrifying unison. They weren't an operating system. They weren't a desktop. Every single screen was filled with a live video feed of my own face. My terrified, pale face, lit by the glow of the monitor in front of me. 20 images of me, staring back with wide eyes. My panic, reflected and multiplied across the room. A girl screamed. A piercing, sharp sound that broke the spell. People jumped to their feet, chairs clattering. Someone pointed. At me. Every eye in the room swiveled in my direction. Their faces a mix of confusion and fear. They were looking from the screens to me, and back to the screens. I didn't think. I ran. I slammed into the glass door, my shoulder taking the impact. The bell jangled wildly. I stumbled out onto the sidewalk, into the dirty orange glow of the streetlights. I ran, my bad ankle screaming in protest. I didn't care. I just ran. After half a block, I risked to look back. I could see through the large front window of the internet cafe. People were crowded around the counter, yelling at the kid who worked there. And I saw someone else. A man in a plain gray jumpsuit had come out from a back room. A technician. He was calm, holding up his hands, talking to the kid. He moved to one of the computer terminals and started typing. He was trying to fix it. He was part of it. As I watched, he finished whatever he was doing and turned, making eye contact with the kid at the counter. The light from the street caught his face, and I stopped breathing. It wasn't a random technician. It was him, the man from the park, the man I'd seen from my apartment window, a dark shape standing under a tree, just watching. The same nondescript face, the same dead eyes. He wasn't just a shadow. He was an employee, a handler. They weren't just in the clinic. They weren't just on my computer. They were everywhere. The world tilted. I turned and ran again, a raw sound of pure animal fear clawing its way up my throat. I ran without direction, just moving, putting distance between me and them. The streetlights blurred. The city became a maze designed to trap me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. A call. I didn't know. It was a tracker. A microphone. A leash. I saw a trash can on the corner. Without slowing down, I ripped the phone from my pocket and threw it. It hit the metal rim with a clatter and disappeared into the darkness inside. I felt a flash of relief. A line cut. I kept moving, my pace slowing to a fast, limping walk. Blocks bled into one another. I was just trying to disappear. I passed a closed electronics store. A huge window display was filled with dozens of televisions, all turned off, black and silent. I was almost past it when they all turned on. Every single one, from the small 19-inch screens to the massive 80-inch displays. They lit up the sidewalk with a cold, blue-white light. It wasn't a commercial. It wasn't a news broadcast. It was a live feed. From a camera inside my apartment, I froze, feet glued to the pavement. I was looking at my own bedroom, my unmade bed, the window looking out onto the street. Everything exactly as I had left it. But I wasn't alone. A figure was standing next to the bed. A person dressed in the same plain, gray jumpsuit as the technician from the cafe. Their back was to the camera. I couldn't see their face. They were holding something. The broken doll. The one from the warehouse. The one I had left on my nightstand. I watched, paralyzed, as the figure moved with quiet efficiency. They took a small tube from their pocket. Superglue. They carefully applied a line of it to the doll's broken porcelain neck. Then they pressed the head back into place, holding it for a moment, making sure it was secure. They weren't destroying my apartment. They weren't threatening me with violence. They were fixing their props, tidying the set. The figure placed the newly repaired doll on my pillow, propping it up so it was sitting, facing the hidden camera, facing me. Then, they simply turned and walked out of the frame. The dozens of screens held the image. My bed, my room, and the doll sitting there, its painted eyes staring out into the empty space, waiting for me to come home. The streetlights cast a sick orange halo on the wet pavement. My breath came in ragged bursts, each one a puff of white in the cold night air. The image of the doll, its head neatly glued back on, was seared into my brain. They weren't just watching. They were resetting the stage. My apartment wasn't a sanctuary I had lost. It was a set I had temporarily vacated. The map in my pocket felt like a block of ice against my thigh. It was their script, their breadcrumb trail. Follow it, and I was playing their game. Don't follow it. What then? They find you anyway. They were in the cafes, in the buildings, in the fucking TVs, in a storefront window. But defiance was the only weapon I had left. Playing their game led to a repaired doll on my pillow. Maybe, just maybe, going off script would lead somewhere else. I needed information, but not from the sprawling, compromised web. I needed to see the real world. I walked until I found a public library, its lights still on. A place with old books and slow computers hardwired to the wall. It felt safer. I found an empty terminal in the back and typed her name again. Dr. Lena Harding. This time I ignored the articles and testimonials. I looked for a physical address. Harding Therapy Group. A corporate tower downtown. A world away from abandoned clinics and back-alley internet cafes. An hour later, I was across the street from it. A sleek monster of glass and steel that speared the low-hanging clouds. I sat in a 24-hour coffee shop, nursing a black coffee I didn't want. The place was almost empty. The air smelled of burnt espresso and cleaning chemicals. I watched the entrance to her building. Men and women in sharp suits flowed in and out, talking on phones, carrying briefcases. It was a picture of absolute, soul-crushing normality. Was I the crazy one? The thought was a venomous whisper. Maybe I had imagined it all. The voice on the intercom, the man in the gray jumpsuit, the screens. A massive psychotic break, fueled by whatever they gave me at the clinic. Maybe this was a real, respectable doctor, and I was just some paranoid lunatic stalking her. The normality of this place was the most disorienting thing I had seen all night. It was a clean, solid wall of fact, and I was beating my head against it. I watched the revolving doors spin, and for a few minutes, I let the doubt wash over me. It was easier than the fear. Then I saw her. Dr. Lena Harding. Unmistakable. The same severe haircut. The same calculated posture. She walked out of the revolving doors, a leather briefcase in one hand. She looked exactly like every other executive leaving the building. She paused on the sidewalk, looking left, then right. I slid lower in my seat. I expected her to hail a cab or get into a Blacktown car. She didn't. She turned right and walked toward the corner, her heels clicking with a sharp, clear sound. She walked past the crosswalk and turned again, heading down a steep ramp that led beneath the building, the parking garage. My feeling of doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, prickling certainty. Something was wrong. Professionals like her had drivers. They didn't park their own cars in cavernous underground garages. I stayed put, my eyes glued to the dark opening she had disappeared into. 1 minute passed. Then 2. My coffee was cold. A bus hissed past, blocking my view for a second. Then it came out. Not a sedan, not an SUV. A van, a sterile white van with no markings. Not even a license plate on the front, the kind of van used for deliveries or maintenance. Or a private ambulance. The windows were blacked out. It pulled out of the garage, its tires silent on the asphalt, and merged smoothly into the downtown traffic. It slid through a yellow light and was gone. What in the hell does a therapist need with an unmarked, windowless van? The question hammered in my head. I threw a few crumpled bills on the table and walked out of the coffee shop, my limp more pronounced than before. The script was the map. They wanted me at the pier. Screw the pier. The real answers were in that building. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power. Marble floors so polished they looked wet. A faint, pleasant scent pumped through the vents. I felt grimy and out of place, my clothes damp, my face pale with fear. I walked toward the directory, trying to look like I belonged. A delivery guy in a bright green polo shirt was struggling with a dolly stacked high with boxes. As he pushed it through the security turnstile, he propped the glass gate open with his hip. "Thanks, man," he grunted, not even looking at me as I slipped through behind him. I was in. The directory was a touchscreen. Harding Therapy Group. Suite 1400. I walked to the elevator bank, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I pressed the button. The doors slid open with a soft chime. Inside, canned orchestral music played softly. The ride up was the longest minute of my life. 7. 8. The chime for each floor was a countdown. 12. 13. Ding! Floor 14. The doors opened onto a quiet, carpeted hallway. It was silent up here. Down the hall, I saw it. A heavy glass door with frosted lettering. Harding Therapy Group. I walked to it, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. It was locked. Of course it was. I jiggled the handle. Nothing. I knelt, peering at the lock, a simple keycard reader and a standard pin and tumbler lock below it. I fumbled in my pockets, my mind racing. A paperclip. A piece of wire, anything. The hallway speaker above my head crackled. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a single burst of static, followed by a voice. Distorted. Digital. Like an old text-to-speech program. Wrong way, Subject A. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked up. I slowly looked up at the small, circular speaker grill. It couldn't be. Not here. Not in a public hallway. The voice crackled again, calm and devoid of any emotion. The next location is the pier. The script requires you at the pier. Don't disappoint me. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a phone call. They were in the walls. They were in the building's infrastructure. They weren't just following me. They were all around me, in invisible, omnipresent cage. The desire to run, to flee back down the elevator and into the street was overwhelming, but where would I go? They were already there. No, I wasn't a subject. My name wasn't A. I grabbed the door handle, a surge of adrenaline cutting through the fear. Getting into this office was the only move I had left. It was the only place they didn't want me to be. I pulled a thin metal stay from the collar of my own shirt, bending it, jamming it into the keyhole. I had no idea what I was doing, just mimicking things I'd seen in movies. I twisted it, jiggling, scraping. My breath held tight in my chest. It was useless. The metal bent. I was about to give up, to slam my fist against the glass in frustration. Click! The lock gave. I have no idea how. Maybe I got lucky. Maybe they let me in. The thought was chilling. I didn't care. I pushed the door open, slipped inside, and shut it gently behind me. I was in a waiting room, nice chairs, a table with magazines. It was clean, professional, and utterly soulless. It smelled of lemon polish. Beyond it was a hallway with several doors. The one at the end was slightly ajar. Dr. Harding's office. I moved down the hall, my bad ankle throbbing. I pushed the door open. The office was immaculate. A huge mahogany desk faced the door. Behind it, a wall of framed diplomas and a single large abstract painting. It was the office of a successful, organized professional. Not a hint of the madness I was living. I felt a fresh wave of that sickening doubt. No weird props, no hidden messages, just an office. Then I saw the computer monitor on her desk. It was on. The screen glowed with a soft blue light. I walked around the desk. I didn't have to touch the mouse. The screen wasn't sleeping. It was active. Displaying a program. A grid of small black and white video feeds. Dozens of them. My heart stopped. My eyes darted across the screens, trying to process what I was seeing. And then I found it. In the top left corner, a live feed. of me. I was staring at the back of my own head, my hunched shoulders. I was looking at myself, looking at the screen. I instinctively raised a hand to my hair. The figure on the screen did the same, a half-second behind. The camera was hidden somewhere behind me. In the painting. In the bookcase. I spun around, scanning the room, but I couldn't see it. I turned back to the screen. It was me. Liv. In her office. My throat was too tight to breathe. I leaned on the desk for support, my knuckles white. My eyes fell away from my own image and saw the others. The other boxes in the grid. They were all live feeds. Each one showed a different person in a different location. I saw a young woman huddled in something that looked like a high school locker room, her face buried in her knees. I saw a man, about my age, pacing in what looked like a cheap motel room, pulling at his hair. Another screen showed an empty bedroom, the sheets on the bed tossed and tangled. Beneath each video feed was a small, typed label, "The woman in the locker room, subject F, scholastic trauma variant, The man in the motel, subject D, transient paranoia variant, My eyes shot back to my own feed. There was a label beneath my window, too. The text was small and clinical, subject A, urban isolation variant, The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. This wasn't my story. This map wasn't my map. It was a template. A variant. I wasn't a patient. I wasn't a murderer discovering his past. I wasn't even the star of my own horror show. I was just Subject A. One of many. We were all rats, each in a carefully constructed maze designed to test a different kind of fear. My unique, personal hell was just a line item in their research. I stared at the screen, at the faces of the other subjects, at their private terror displayed in a neat grid on a doctor's computer. The world narrowed to that glowing monitor. My defiance, my run through the city, my desperate attempt to go off script. It was all just data to them. As I watched, paralyzed, the text beneath my own video feed flickered. A new line of words appeared, typed out by an invisible operator. Subject A, off script. Escalation protocol recommended. My fingers spasmed on the smooth surface of the desk. The words on the screen were a brand. Escalation protocol recommended. Protocol. A word for machines and lab rats. My fists clenched. My name was not Subject A. This wasn't a variant. This was my life. Rage, cold and clean, cut through the fog of fear. I wasn't their data point. I lunged for the mouse. The cursor skittered across the screen as my shaking hand tried to take control. I had to find something. Anything. An answer. A name. A reason for this calculated hell. My clicks were frantic. I tried to open files on the desktop. Access denied. Encryption level 7. Administrator lockout. Every icon was a locked door. I slammed the mouse on the desk. Useless. I scanned the desktop again, my eyes darting, searching for a gap in the armor. And I saw it. A single folder, plain yellow, unlike the secure icons around it. The name was simple. Inspiration. It was unlocked. It had to be a trap. A deliberate piece of cheese left for the rat. I didn't care. It was the only door that wasn't bolted shut. I double-clicked. A single file sat inside. A video file. sec_cam_archive_20y.mp4. 20 years ago. A lifetime ago. What could that possibly have to do with me? I clicked play. The screen flickered. A new window opened, filled with grainy black and white static. The image slowly resolved. A time and date stamp ticked away in the bottom corner. The quality was poor, a ghost of a recording. It was a child's bedroom. A small bed with a messy comforter. A shelf of dolls. A single nightlight cast long, strange shadows on the wall. My breath hitched. I leaned closer to the monitor. Something moved. Under the bed, I saw a flash of white. A small foot, then a hand. A little girl was hiding there. I could only see parts of her, but I could feel her terror through the 20 years of digital decay. She was trying not to breathe, trying to make herself small enough to disappear. Her eyes were wide, 2 dark circles in the low-resolution image. I knew that look. I had seen it in the mirror. The bedroom door opened. A figure stood in the doorway. A man. His face was lost in shadow, a tall, indistinct shape against the brighter light of the hallway. He didn't move for a long moment. He just stood there, letting the silence stretch. The girl under the bed pulled her knees to her chest. I could see her whole body trembling now. The man stepped into the room. He moved slowly, deliberately. In his hand he held something. My eyes strained to see it. It was a doll. Even in the bad light, I recognized the kind. Porcelain face, frilly dress, and its head was hanging at a wrong angle, the neck clearly snapped. A jolt, like an electric shock, shot through me. The doll on my pillow. The glued-on head. It wasn't a random threat. It was a reference, a symbol. The man walked to the center of the room. He knelt, his back to the camera. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I could hear the audio. It was terrible. A low hiss, crackles of static. But beneath the noise there was a voice. A low, calm whisper. Be still. The sound vibrated through the desk, into my bones. My blood went cold. I knew that voice. I knew that dead, flat tone. The audio file. The warehouse. The tinny speakers. It was the same. The man in the video spoke again, the words cutting through the static like shards of glass. This will be quick. I staggered back from the desk, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a cry. It clicked. A terrible, perfect, hideous click. The world reassembled itself in a new and monstrous shape. The girl under the bed. The dolls. The broken neck. The calm, terrible voice. This wasn't my experiment. This wasn't some random trial to test urban paranoia. This was a reenactment. A memory. Her memory. Dr. Lena Harding. She wasn't the scientist. She was the first subject. The girl under the bed. And she was making us live it with her. Making me live it. I wasn't a rat in a maze. I was an actor in her private, looping nightmare. The cameras, the messages, the isolation. It was all a stage. She was making me him. The man with the doll. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. I was a prop. My fear was her therapy. My torment was her revenge. Then the world exploded in noise. E-R-R-R-R-R-R-R. A fire alarm. Not a subtle crackle from a speaker. This was the building's main system. A deafening, rhythmic shriek that drilled into my skull. Red lights flashed on the ceiling, strobing across the immaculate office, painting everything in blood-red pulses. They knew. They knew I was here. They knew what I'd found. The escalation protocol. Panic slammed into me. Raw. Primal. Run. I had to run, but I couldn't leave this. This proof. My gaze fell on a small, silver USB stick lying next to the keyboard. Harding's. Without thinking, I jammed it into the port. My hand flew back to the mouse, dragging the "inspiration" folder onto the USB icon. A progress bar appeared. Copying. It moved with agonizing slowness. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Running, shouting. 14th floor. Unauthorized access. They were coming. The progress bar was only halfway. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counter-rhythm to the blaring alarm. Come on! Come on! I stared at the green bar, trying to push it forward with my will alone. 70%, 80%. The doorknob rattled. Hard. Someone was twisting it, putting their shoulder into the door. The thick glass shuddered in its frame. 95%, 99%, backquote, copy complete. I ripped the USB from the port and shoved it deep into my pocket. The door bucked again. It wouldn't hold for long. The hallway was death. The elevator was a trap. I spun around, my eyes wild, searching for another way. The window, the huge floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. It was my only chance. I scrambled over the massive desk, knocking over a pen holder. I fumbled with the latch at the bottom of the window. My fingers were slick with sweat. The lock was stiff. I put my whole body into it, grunting with the effort. A loud crack echoed through the room as something in the mechanism gave way. I shoved. A blast of cold, wet air and the roar of the city hit me. The alarm seemed even louder out here. I didn't hesitate. There was no time to think about the fall, the 50-story drop to the street below. I swung one leg over the sill, my bad ankle screaming in protest, then the other. I was out. My shoes found a narrow ledge, no more than a foot wide. My fingers dug into the metal frame of the window. The wind whipped at my clothes, trying to peel me from the side of the building. Below me, the city was a dizzying blur of headlights and streetlights. My stomach lurched. Don't look down! Don't look down! I pressed my body flat against the cold glass of the skyscraper. My goal was the next office. Maybe an empty one, maybe a window I could break. I started to shuffle sideways, my knuckles white, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The USB drive in my pocket felt like a lead weight, threatening to pull me into the abyss. Each step was a lifetime. My fingers slid, caught, slid again. The roar of the wind and the scream of the alarm merged into one solid wall of sound. I risked a glance toward the next window. It was dark, empty, good. I shuffled faster, my confidence growing a tiny, stupid fraction. I was going to make it. I had the proof. I was getting away. I reached the next window. I pressed my face against the glass, peering into the darkness, planning my entry. And I saw a man. He was standing in the dark office, just watching me. He was wearing a gray technician's jumpsuit, the same jumpsuit as the man in the park, the man at the internet cafe, the shadow that had been 2 steps behind me this whole time. My blood froze. My fingers went numb. He wasn't a hallucination. He wasn't a random civilian. He was one of them. He stood there, perfectly calm amidst the flashing red lights reflecting off the glass. He saw me. He knew I saw him. He held a small walkie-talkie in one hand. He raised it to his lips, but I couldn't hear what he said. The wind stole the words. Then he lowered it. A slow, thin smile spread across his face. It was not a friendly smile. It was a smile of ownership, of complete and total control. He looked me right in the eye, separated by an inch of soundproof glass and a 50-story drop. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his free hand and gave me a thumbs up. A thumbs up. The simple, universal gesture of approval. From him. It wasn't a threat. It was a message. Good show. Keep performing. The wind tried to rip me from the building, but my fingers were claws of ice, frozen to the metal window frame. The alarm shrieked. My blood ran cold, then hot. White hot. Rage. It wasn't fear anymore. Fear was for rats in a maze. This was different. This was the fury of a man being laughed at from the other side of the glass. The technician's smile was a period at the end of a sentence. My sentence. No. I wasn't going to shuffle along this ledge like a frightened pigeon. I wasn't going to fall. I wasn't going to be a footnote in Harding's research paper. My gaze locked on the dark window, on the calm, smiling face inside. That was the only way out. Through him. I sucked in a lungful of wet, cold air. My bad ankle screamed a protest I ignored. I took one wide, desperate step sideways. My foot landed on the metal divider, separating the 2 massive panes of glass. My other foot followed. I was now directly in front of his window. He watched me, head cocked, a look of mild curiosity on his face. The fury gave me strength. I let go with one hand. I balled it into a fist. I swung. My knuckles exploded in pain as they connected with the thick, unyielding glass. It didn't even vibrate. A small, pathetic thud swallowed by the wind and the alarm. The technician laughed. I couldn't hear it, but I could see it. His shoulders shook. He shook his head slowly, a mock gesture of pity. Stupid. Brute force was their game, not mine. I scanned the window frame. Where I had cracked the latch on my own window, there had to be a corresponding mechanism on this one. My fingers, numb and clumsy, fumbled along the bottom edge. Metal. Smooth, cold metal. Then a seam. A lever. Flush with the frame. Almost invisible. I hooked my fingers under it. It wouldn't budge. They wouldn't make it easy. The technician stepped closer to the glass, his smile gone, replaced by a frown. He saw what I was doing. He raised his walkie-talkie again. No time. I jammed the heel of my palm against the frame for leverage. I put every ounce of my weight, every shred of my terror and rage, into my fingers. There was a groan of stressed metal, then a sharp crack that I felt resonate through my bones. The lever popped out an inch. I shoved it up. The window slid open. Just a few inches. Enough. I squeezed through the gap, my body scraping against the frame. I tumbled onto the carpet of the dark office, gasping for air, the world blessedly still and quiet after the chaos outside. The technician stood frozen 5 feet away, his mouth hanging open. The walkie-talkie was halfway to his lips. He hadn't expected it to work. His composure shattered. He was just a man in a jumpsuit, caught off guard. We stared at each other for a single, silent beat. Then he lunged for me. I scrambled backwards, kicking out. My foot connected with his knee. He grunted, stumbling. I was on my feet, adrenaline dumping into my system. I wasn't fighting for my life. I was fighting for an exit. I saw the office door behind him. I feinted left, then bolted right. He grabbed for my jacket, his fingers catching the sleeve. Fabric ripped. I didn't stop. I hit the door with my shoulder. It was unlocked. I burst into the hallway. The red emergency lights still strobed. The alarm still screamed. I didn't know the layout of this floor. I just ran. Away from that office. I heard him shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I found a stairwell door, threw it open, and started descending. 2 steps at a time. My ankle protested. A sharp, stabbing pain with every landing, but I pushed it down. Noise. Pain. It didn't matter. All that mattered was down. Ground level. I burst out into a service alley 3 floors later. The air was thick with the smell of garbage and rain. The alarm was a muffled shriek from above. I was out. I pulled up my hood, shoved my hands in my pockets, my fingers wrapping around the small, hard rectangle of the USB drive. The proof. I limped out of the alley and melted into the river of anonymous people flowing down the wet sidewalk. I was just another shadow in the city night, but I wasn't the prey anymore. They had shown their hand, they had a face. They had a response team. That private ambulance from before, the one that showed up at the warehouse. It wasn't a coincidence. They weren't just watching. They were on the ground, ready to move, ready to contain their experiment. The game had changed. I wasn't running from them. I was going to hunt them. I needed a phone and a place to think. I found a dimly lit bar, the kind with sticky floors and the smell of stale beer hanging in the air. I slid into a booth in the back, the torn vinyl cold against my skin. I ordered a beer I had no intention of drinking. I just needed to look like I belonged. My mind raced. The map. The map was Harding's game board. Every location was a move. The final location was circled. The docks. Pier 4. Why there? What was waiting for me? Another test? Another piece of theater? Or was that the extraction point, the place where the experiment ended? Every. I wasn't going to walk into it blind. I was going to smoke them out. I watched the patrons, a handful of lonely men staring into their glasses, a couple arguing in low whispers, and one guy slumped over the bar, clearly drunk enough to be suggestible. Perfect. I slid out of the booth and walked over to him. He was big, with a greasy ponytail and a faded band t-shirt. I put a $50 bill on the bar next to his hand. He blinked at it slowly. "What's this for?" He slurred. "A phone call," I said, my voice low. "I need you to do me a favor. Call 911. Tell them there's a huge brawl. Men with knives. Down at the docks. Pier 4. Make it sound bad. Then hang up and walk away. The 50 is yours." He squinted at me, then at the money. A flicker of greedy understanding crossed his face. Cops? What'd you do? I'm paying you $50 to not ask questions and make a phone call? He grinned, a sloppy, broken-toothed thing. He scooped up the bill. For $50 I'll tell them aliens have landed. Pier 4, knives. Got it. He wobbled off his stool and headed for the payphone by the restrooms. I slipped out the front door of the bar before he even picked up the receiver. The rain had let up, leaving the air clean and cold. I found a spot across the street from the entrance to Pier 4, tucked into the deep shadow of a brick warehouse. I could see the whole area. The chain-link fence, the empty loading zones, the massive dark shape of a cargo crane against the night sky. And I waited. It didn't take long. 5 minutes, maybe. I heard the distant wail of a siren, the city's official response. But before the police cruiser got anywhere close, another vehicle came screaming around the corner, its lights flashing a rhythmic pattern of red and white. It was the ambulance. The same private ambulance. It pulled up to the gate of Pier 4 with a squeal of tires. 2 men jumped out. One of them was the technician from the high-rise, the technician I'd fought. His face was grim, his movements tense. They weren't here to render aid. They were containment. They looked around, their eyes sweeping the empty docks, searching for the reported chaos. For me, their body language screamed frustration. They were expecting to find me. Confused, scared, cornered. Instead, they found nothing. My little fabrication had forced their hand, pulled them out into the open. A minute later, a police car arrived. The 2 cops got out, looking confused. They saw the paramedics. Words were exchanged. The technician gestured dismissively. The cops looked annoyed at the false alarm. After a few minutes of standing around in the drizzle, the police car drove off. The technician and his partner got back into the ambulance. But they didn't leave. They sat there for 10 minutes, waiting, hoping I'd still show up. I stayed in the shadows, my heart a slow, steady drum against my ribs. The hunter watches the trap. Finally, the ambulance pulled away from the curb. It didn't head back towards the city center or any hospital. It went south, towards the industrial outskirts, then turned onto a long, winding road that led up into the hills overlooking the bay. A road lined with old cypress trees and high stone walls. A road I recognized. My blood went cold. It was the road from the map, the road that led to the final, circled X. The map wasn't just a guide to my own personal hell. It was their operational blueprint. The warehouse, the park, the office building, and this. This was their home base. I followed on foot, keeping my distance, using the trees and shadows for cover. The road ended at a massive iron gate flanked by stone pillars. A sign read, Oakmont Hills Estates, private. The ambulance didn't go through the gate. It turned onto a smaller, unmarked service road just before it. I waited until its taillights disappeared, then jogged to the service entrance, a simple chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. One section, near a thick oak tree, was sagging. The links were cut and crudely refastened with wire. A way in. For staff. For them. For me. I pulled myself over, my hands stinging from the wire. I was inside. It wasn't a residential complex. It was a series of large, windowless buildings that looked more like movie sound stages than luxury homes. They were spaced far apart, separated by manicured lawns and gravel paths. The ambulance was parked outside the largest one, Building C. The lights were on inside. I crept closer, my sneakers silent on the wet grass. The building had no windows, just large bay doors and a single, standard metal door. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I circled the building. It was a massive, featureless box, except on the back side. There, propped against the wall, were wooden frames and panels of fake brick. Discarded set pieces. My eyes followed them up. Higher up, I saw a network of scaffolding and catwalks, and a small, square window 20 feet off the ground. It was dark. This wasn't a house. It wasn't a villa. It was a set. I found a maintenance ladder, bolted to the wall a few yards away. I swarmed up it, my ankle throbbing in time with my heart. I climbed onto the scaffolding and made my way to the window. I peered inside. My breath caught in my throat. I was looking down into my apartment. My apartment. The gray couch. The bookshelf with the single book. The kitchen counter. It was all there. Perfect. Except it wasn't an apartment. From my vantage point, I could see the top edges of the walls. They were just flats, held up by wooden braces. Beyond them was the vast, dark emptiness of the soundstage, filled with cables, lights, and rigging. My prison was a theatrical production. A wave of nausea and disorientation washed over me. My reality was a lie, constructed from plywood and paint. The rage returned, clearing my head. I saw a door on the far side of the set, a door that didn't exist in the real layout. A small red light glowed above it. The control room. I found a catwalk that led across the top of the set. I moved silently, a ghost in the rigging. I reached the door and listened. Muffled sounds. A low hum of electronics. The faint click of a keyboard. I tried the knob. Locked. Of course. I took the USB drive from my pocket. It was heavy, solid metal. I gripped it like a weapon. Then I kicked the door. Hard. Right next to the knob. The wood splintered. The lock burst from the frame. I slammed the door open and threw myself inside. He was there. The technician. Sitting in a leather chair, surrounded by a bank of monitors. On the screens I saw every angle of my empty apartment. He spun around, his eyes wide with shock. It was the last thing he expected. He scrambled to his feet, knocking over a can of soda. He was bigger than me, but I was faster. I was fueled by weeks of paranoia and fear. I lunged, not at him, but at the console. I swept my arm across it, sending keyboards, mice, and monitors crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks and broken glass. He yelled, a wordless cry of fury, and tackled me. We hit the floor hard. His fists hammered at my ribs. I twisted, bucking him off. I got to my knees, gasping. He was already up, grabbing a heavy metal flashlight from a charging port on the wall. He swung it at my head. I threw up my arm to block it. Bone crunched. A bolt of pure agony shot up to my shoulder. My arm went numb. He raised the flashlight for another blow. I kicked his legs out from under him. He went down with a crash. I scrambled on top of him, my one good hand finding his throat. He dropped the flashlight and clawed at my face. His nails dug into my cheek. I squeezed. He choked, his eyes bulging. My vision tunneled. All the fear, all the confusion, all the helplessness. I poured it all into my grip. His struggles weakened. His hands fell away from my face. A low gurgle escaped his lips. I held on for another second, then another, before letting go. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. I staggered to my feet, my arms screaming, my breath coming in ragged sobs. I leaned against the broken console for support. My eyes fell on the one monitor that was still working, the main one. The director's view. The image on the screen was from the camera hidden in the smoke detector. The front door of my apartment was opening. A figure stepped inside. Dr. Lena Harding. She was dressed in a crisp lab coat. Her expression was calm, clinical. In her gloved hand, she held a large glass syringe filled with a clear liquid. She scanned the empty room, a slight frown on her face. She thought I was still in there, sedated or broken, waiting for the final injection. The end of the experiment. The closing scene of her twisted, private play. She had no idea the lead actor was off script. She had no idea I was in the director's chair, watching her. My arm was a dead weight, a sack of broken glass and fire hanging from my shoulder. I gritted my teeth, ignoring it. The unconscious technician on the floor was a messy footnote. My entire focus was on the monitor. On her. Dr. Lena Harding. She stood in the center of my cage, a ghost in a lab coat. The syringe in her hand caught the theatrical lighting, the needle a single silver glint. She was the director, ready for the final scene. But the script had changed. The lead actor was watching from the booth. Rage was a cold, clean fuel. I scanned the console, a chaotic mess of broken plastic and live wires. My eyes landed on a small panel, still intact. A bank of switches labeled audio. One was marked intercom. Stage A. I looked at the monitor on the floor, still glowing. The technician's work files were open. One file blinked in the corner of the screen. backquote warehouse underscore audio underscore 20 years underscore clip.wave backquote. My blood ran cold. The clip from the USB drive. He'd been analyzing it. My good hand found the mouse. Pain shot up my broken arm as I leaned over. I ignored it. A click. Double click. The file was open in an audio player. I pushed a master fader on the console all the way up. My finger hovered over the intercom switch. Let the show begin. I flicked the switch. For a second, nothing. Then a low hiss filled the soundstage. Not from my speakers, but from hers. Hidden speakers. In the walls of my fake apartment. I saw her head twitch. A look of mild annoyance. She probably thought it was a technical glitch. Then the sound came. A crackle of static. A woman's panicked gasp. The heavy, rhythmic thud of a nightstick hitting something soft. Again. And again. The audio from the old security tape. The ghost of a 20-year-old crime, resurrected through cheap speakers. This was the bait. My reality fed back to its creator. Harding froze. The clinical mask on her face didn't just crack. It fell away. Her eyes went wide. She knew that sound. It wasn't part of her experiment. It was something else. Something real. The syringe trembled in her hand. Her head snapped left, then right, scanning the empty, fake rooms. The hunter, suddenly sensing a trap. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She took a half step back, toward the door she'd entered through. Her professional cool was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear I recognized instantly. It was the same fear I had lived with for weeks. "Who's there?" she finally managed to gasp, her voice thin and sharp. "Who's in here?" She was looking at the camera. At me. But she didn't know it. She was talking to a ghost. The sign was delivered. The rat was aware of the maze. Good. I leaned toward a small microphone attached to the console. I hit the transmit button. I pitched my voice low, letting the digital processor distort it into a grating, electronic rasp. "It's just the memory returning, Doctor," I rasped, the words echoing around her in the set. "You said it yourself. Facing the past is the only way to heal." I watched her face on the monitor. Pure terror. She dropped the syringe. It clattered on the floor, rolling under the gray couch. She spun around, a cornered animal. This was no longer her controlled environment. It was mine. The constriction was beginning. My good hand flew across a different part of the console. A panel marked SFX Stage A. I slammed my palm down on a large red button labeled Lighting Cycle. Instantly, the lights in the apartment began to flicker violently, plunging the room into strobing chaos, from stark white to pitch black and back again. Harding cried out, shielding her eyes. I hit another switch. Lock, main door. A heavy, amplified thunk echoed through the soundstage as the magnetic lock on the apartment's main door engaged. I saw her on the monitor, a frantic silhouette against the strobing light, lurching toward the door and rattling the knob. Locked. Trapped. I wasn't done. I saw a button labeled TV ON. I pressed it. The television in the fake living room flickered to life, not with a normal broadcast, but with a live feed from a camera I didn't know existed. A camera in this control room. My camera. The image on her TV was me. I leaned forward, making sure my face was visible on the monitor. The cuts, the bruises, the cold fury in my eyes. Her eyes, wide with strobe-spotted terror, found the television screen. She saw me, the experiment, the subject, sitting in the director's chair. A scream tore from her throat. A real one. Not a performance. It was a sound of a mind breaking, of a god realizing it was just a mortal in a box. She abandoned the door and ran blindly in the other direction, toward the only other exit, the one that wasn't real. The one that led out of the set and into the vast darkness of the soundstage. She burst through the flimsy prop door, stumbling out into the open space under the high grid of catwalks and lights. This was the flashpoint. She stood there, panting, wild-eyed, blinking in the dim work lights of the massive room. Her pristine lab coat was rumpled. Her carefully constructed world was in smoking ruins around her. Her eyes scanned the darkness, finally landing on the lit window of the control room high above the stage floor. She saw me standing there, looking down at her. "Who are you?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "What are you?" I didn't need the microphone anymore. I held up my right hand. The good one. Between my thumb and forefinger I held the small, metal rectangle. The USB drive. The proof. The beginning and the end. "I'm your result," I called down, my voice raw. "I'm the loose end." For a moment she just stared, her chest heaving. The fear on her face was slowly, impossibly, being replaced by something else. Something much, much worse. The corners of her mouth twitched. Then, a low chuckle escaped her lips. It grew louder, morphing into a full-blown cackle. A wild, unhinged laugh that bounced off the soundproofed walls. It was the laugh of someone who had lost everything and found it hilarious. My victory felt hollow. My blood ran cold again. This wasn't the reaction of a defeated woman. This was something else. "Result!" she screamed up at me, a wild grin plastered on her face. "You think you're the result? Oh, you poor, stupid little man. You're not the result. You're just a rough draft." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" She was still laughing, a high, piercing sound. She pointed a shaking finger, not at me, but back inside the control room, at the bank of monitors behind me. "You think you won? You think you're the only one? Look! Just look!" I turned. My eyes scanned the bank of broken and dark screens. Then I saw it. The one screen I had overlooked, tucked away in the corner, not connected to my set. It showed a different room, a sterile, padded white room. And in that room, there was a woman, curled into a ball in the corner, her body shaking with sobs. She looked just as lost, just as terrified as I had been. On the back of her simple gray jumpsuit was a stenciled label, Subject B. As I watched, frozen, a door in the white room slid open. A man in a technician's jumpsuit walked in. He looked different from the one on the floor behind me, but the same cold, detached expression was on his face. He carried a clipboard. He said something to the woman I couldn't hear. The scar. It wasn't over. It had barely begun. This wasn't a private theater for my torment. It was a factory. And the production line was still running. I hadn't destroyed the machine. I had just punched a single hole in the wall, only to see 1,000 other cages stretching into the darkness beyond. My head swam. Subject B. A factory. The words echoed in the vast, dead space of the soundstage, colder than the concrete floor under my shoes. It wasn't my story. It was a template, a goddamn production line for broken minds. The wild, cackling laughter from below drew my eyes back down. Harding stood there, a marionette with its strings cut, jerking with manic energy. Her grin was a slash in her pale face. The terror was gone, replaced by a terrifying, unhinged clarity. "Rough draft," she screamed up at me again, her voice bouncing off the high catwalks. "You get it now, don't you? Oh, you're a quick study, I'll give you that." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My world had been a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. Now I found out my illusion wasn't even an original. She started pacing in a tight circle on the stage floor, her lab coat flapping around her. She talked, not just to me, but to the darkness, to the silent cameras, to the ghosts only she could see. "He was my stepfather," she spat, the words sharp and full of acid. "Dr. Arthur Graham. St. Arthur to his patients. Respected. Beloved." She stopped, her head tilted, as if listening to a memory. "He did things to me, things no one would ever believe. Told me they were treatments. For my own good, he used his science, his goddamn psychology, to make me believe I was the one who was wrong, that I was the one who was broken." Her finger, still trembling, jabbed up toward the control room window at the banks of equipment behind me. "This isn't revenge," she hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that still carried in the huge room. "Don't you see? Revenge is pointless. It's messy. This is research. This is controlled. This is science." My good hand clenched into a fist. The pain in my other arm was a distant fire, a thing that belonged to another body. I kept my eyes locked on her. "Research for what?" I bit out. "For understanding," she shrieked, throwing her arms wide. To replicate the conditions. To isolate the variables. To understand how a man like that works. How he can take a person and just hollow them out. Her eyes found mine again, boring into me from the floor below. The manic grin returned. And you, Subject A, you were the perfect clay. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Why me? Your profile, she said, tapping her temple. It was all there, just a few degrees off from his. That little narcissistic streak. That flicker of temper you hide so well. The tiny buried seed of cruelty that you pretend isn't there. I saw it. We saw it. All it needed was the right encouragement. She smiled. It was the worst thing I had ever seen. I wanted to know if I could nurture that seed. I wanted to see if I could take a man like you, a man who thought he was good, and turn him inside out. I wanted to prove that anyone, given the right push, can become the monster, or the victim. I just had to see which way you'd break. I looked from her crazed face back to the monitor showing the crying woman, Subject B. Then back to the fake apartment set, my cage. It was all a test. A sick, twisted ACE-4B test with human souls. The amnesia, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Harding barked a laugh, a sharp, ugly sound. Amnesia? Oh, you poor thing. How you cling to that. There was no amnesia. She took a step closer to the set, gesturing at it like a proud designer showing off her work. Just a powerful, dissociative cocktail, administered while you were sedated after your little accident, topped off with a few deep-state hypnotic sessions to blur the edges. It's not about erasing memories. It's about making you doubt them, making you afraid of your own mind. It's so much more effective. Every word was a nail hammered into my skull. The map! My script! She shot back instantly. A breadcrumb trail of my own design, leading you to curated memories I planted in your subconscious. A little push here, a little whisper there. Your dark side wasn't born, you idiot. It was manufactured. I built it. I built him. The monster in your head was me, all along. A new kind of rage started to burn through the shock. It was clean and hot. She hadn't just trapped me. She had violated me on a level one didn't even have a name for. She'd reached into my head and scribbled her filth all over it. As if sensing the shift in me, her demeanor changed again. The manic energy collapsed inward, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. The predator was back. She turned on her heel and walked calmly, purposefully, back into the set. I watched her on the main monitor as she re-entered the fake living room. She ignored the clattering syringe on the floor. She ignored the strobing, flickering lights. She walked straight to a small, unmarked panel on the wall next to the prop bookshelf, a panel I had never seen before. I saw her hand reach out. She pressed a single, recessed red button. A low groan vibrated through the floor of the control room. I looked up, toward the only exit. A thick, solid steel door, painted to blend in with the grimy cinder block wall, had begun its slow, hydraulic descent. It was halfway down. The trap wasn't the fake apartment. It was this room. "What are you doing?" I yelled into the mic, but she wasn't listening. She was watching me on the TV inside the set, her face a mask of cold triumph. The true constriction. She wasn't just my torturer. She was my warden. Adrenaline dumped into my system, a hot, chemical flood. No more questions, no more revelations, only the door. Closing. I lunged. My feet slipped on the broken plastic covering the floor, but I caught myself. The heavy door was 3/4 of the way down, the gap shrinking with a steady, grinding finality. I threw my body toward it, my broken arms screaming in protest as it swung uselessly at my side. A blur of white. Harding. She burst out of the control room door, the one the technician had used. She was faster than I expected. She threw herself at me, not to hurt me, but to slow me down. An obstacle. "It's over!" she screamed, her hands grabbing at my shirt. "The test is over! You failed!" Her claws dug into my shoulder. I grunted, twisting, trying to shake her off. The door was still closing. A 2-foot gap. Then, 1.5. We stumbled together, a clumsy, desperate dance. I couldn't fight her. Not with one arm. I had to get past her. I shoved forward with all my weight, using her as a battering ram. She lost her footing, her eyes wide with surprise. She wasn't expecting me to just run through her. I pushed her hard. She staggered back, tripping over a loose cable on the floor and falling in a heap. The gap. A foot of space left. Maybe less. No time to think. I didn't run. I dove. I threw myself at the floor, sliding on my stomach like a man stealing a base. Dust and grime scraped my face. The concrete was cold and hard against my cheek. I aimed for that shrinking slice of light. My shoulders scraped the bottom edge of the massive door. My hips wedged for a terrifying second. I kicked my legs, scrambling, pushing against the floor with my good hand. The steel was cold against my back. Then I was through. Thunk. The sound of the door hitting the concrete floor was absolute. Final. It echoed in the hallway, a sound like a guillotine. I lay on the dusty floor, panting, my chest heaving. My body ached. My mind was a wreck. But I was out. I was out of the box. For a moment there was silence. Just the sound of my own ragged breath. Then, from inside the control room, a scream started. It wasn't the shriek of rage she'd aimed at me before. It was something else. A thin, high-pitched wail of pure, animal panic. "No!" I heard her cry, her voice muffled by the thick steel door. "No, you can't! The test was on him! On him! Let me out!" A new sound. A soft electronic chime from inside the room, amplified and tinny through the steel. I pushed myself up, my back against the cold wall, listening. Then, a voice. Not hers. A calm, male voice, coming from the intercom system inside the room she was now trapped in. It was the same flat, detached tone as the technician I'd knocked out, but it wasn't him. It was cleaner. Sharper. "The primary subject has breached containment," the voice announced, as if reading a weather report. "Variable contamination confirmed. Initiating secondary protocol." I heard Harding start to hammer on the inside of the door. The sound was frantic, muffled. "Who is this?" she screamed. "Let me out of here! I'm Dr. Harding!" "I'm in charge here." There was a pause. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I held my breath. Then the intercom clicked on again. The calm, male voice returned, and the words it spoke froze the blood in my veins. "Test phase for Dr. Harding. Initiating." I lay on the floor, the dust and grime a gritty mask on my cheek. The sound of the door thudding shut was the sound of a casket closing. I was out. A raw, ragged breath tore from my lungs. Then another. The air in the hallway was stale, thick with the smell of old concrete and decay. But it was the best thing I had ever tasted. Inside the control room, Harding's screams turned from rage to a thin, animal squeal. A sound of pure panic. "No," her voice pushed through the steel, thick and muffled. "No, you can't. The test was on him. On him. Let me out." A soft chime. The sound was wrong. Too clean for this place. It came from inside her new prison. I pushed myself up, my back scraping against the cinder block wall, my good hand flat on the floor to steady myself. My whole body was a symphony of pain. Then the voice. Calm. Male. Not the technician. It was different. Polished. It came through the intercom inside her room, but I could hear it clearly through the door, a sterile whisper in the tomb. "The primary subject has breached containment," the voice said. It was like a machine reading a report. "Variable contamination confirmed. Initiating secondary protocol." Harding started pounding on the inside of the door. The thuds were heavy, desperate. "Who is this?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Let me out of here! I'm Dr. Harding! I'm in charge here!" Silence stretched. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath. The intercom clicked on again. That same level, male voice. The words it spoke turned the sweat on my skin to ice. "Test phase for Dr. Harding. Initiating." A sound I can't describe left her throat. A gagging, tearing noise. It was the sound of a god realizing it was just a bug under a microscope. I had to move. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking. The injured arm was a dead weight, sending jolts of fire up to my shoulder with every movement. I ignored it. I looked down the long corridor. It was dark, lit only by a few caged yellow bulbs high on the ceiling, spaced too far apart. Darkness pooled between them. One direction led back to the soundstage entrance. The other was a question mark. No going back. I started to run. Not fast. A clumsy, limping jog. My shoes scraped on the concrete. The sound echoed. Too loud. Each footstep was a declaration. I am here. I am here. The hallway stretched on. Doors lined the wall, all of them heavy windowless steel, like the one that had just sealed Harding's fate. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This wasn't a backstage area. This was a prison. I passed an open doorway and risked a glance inside. My stomach twisted. It was another soundstage. And inside, a set. A living room. A different one. This one was decorated like a college dorm room. Faded band posters on the wall. A bong on a coffee table. It was empty. But it was ready. Waiting. I forced myself to keep moving. The hallway turned. Another open soundstage yawned to my left. This one was a pristine, white kitchen, the kind you see in magazines. An island in the middle. Stainless steel appliances. It looked clean. Perfect. And completely soulless. How many of us were there? Nostitur Kaila. The thought hit me like a physical blow. The sick feeling in my gut wasn't just disgust anymore. It was a kind of vertigo. I wasn't the star of my own private horror show. I was just one rat in a complex of mazes. My legs burned. My lungs felt like they were full of acid. I had to find a way out. Up ahead, the corridor opened into a wider junction. In the center, under a buzzing fluorescent light, a large board was mounted to the wall. A map. I stumbled toward it, my good hand pressed against the grimy wall for support. It was a schematic. A blueprint of the entire facility. Floor plans, numbers, labels I didn't understand. My eyes scanned frantically, searching for the one word that mattered. Exit. There. On the far side of the complex. A series of doors marked with the universal little green running man. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. There was a way out. A real way. My finger traced the path. Through this hall, left at the T-junction, past the block labeled incinerator, and then a straight shot. I could do it. I could make it. Then I saw it. Tucked next to the cluster of exit doors on the schematic, a little piece of text, different from the printed labels. It was handwritten in sharp black ink. False exit. Psych trap number 4. The air went out of my lungs. My blood ran cold. The map wasn't a map. It was another page of the script, another one of her goddamn breadcrumbs. Or his, the calm voices. It didn't matter. It was all a lie. W-E-E-E-E-E-E-E. Ooh-oh! W-E-E-E-E-E-E. Ooh-oh! A klaxon shattered the silence. It was deafeningly loud, bouncing off the hard surfaces, drilling directly into my skull. Red lights began to flash, strobing, bathing the corridor in a hellish, pulsing light. 1 second, I saw everything in stark, bloody red. The next, in deep, disorienting shadow. The voice from the intercom was back, but this time, it wasn't just in one room. It was everywhere. It boomed from speakers hidden in the ceiling, a voice of absolute authority. Subject A has breached the primary security perimeter. Unauthorized access to Level 2. Initiate full lockdown protocols. Response teams converge on Sector Gamma. A low groan vibrated through the floor. It was a sound I now knew, a sound I hated. From both ends of the corridor, heavy steel doors began their descent. Grinding, inevitable, turning my path into a dead end. There was no time to think. They owned the map. They owned the maze. The only way out was to run. I picked a direction and bolted. The red strobes disoriented me, making it hard to judge distance. The klaxon was a physical pressure against my eardrums. I was just a panicked animal running from the noise. The corridor ahead ended in a T-junction. To the left, a steel door was already halfway down. To the right, another was just beginning its descent. I skidded on the slick floor, changing direction, my body screaming in protest. I poured on every ounce of speed I had left. The gap was shrinking. 10 feet. 8. The door was huge, a solid slab of metal, groaning as it slid down its tracks. 5 feet. The gap was chest high. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. 3 feet. The gap was at my waist. I dove. It was a repeat of before, but faster, sloppier, more desperate. I threw myself at the floor, sliding on my stomach across the dusty concrete. The bottom edge of the door was a descending shadow. I felt it scrape my back, a line of cold, immense pressure. The fabric of my shirt ripped. For a split second I was wedged, pinned. Panic, pure and electric, seized my heart. I kicked my legs wildly, scrabbling with my good hand, pushing myself forward. The pressure released. I was through. WHUMP. The door slammed into the floor behind me, the impact shuddering through the concrete. It was so close it stirred the hair on the back of my neck. I was in a new section. The klaxon was fainter here, the red lights gone, replaced by the steady, sterile hum of white fluorescent tubes. I was in some kind of storage area. The air smelled of cardboard and plastic. Stacks of wooden pallets lined the walls, piled high with white boxes. All of them were stamped with the same logo, a stylized O and G intertwined, and underneath the words, Omnigen Pharmaceuticals. It wasn't a madwoman's pet project. It wasn't some private obsession. This was corporate, funded, organized. The scale of it, the sheer resources involved, was staggering. My little drama wasn't a play. It was a product. I pushed myself up, my whole body trembling now, a reaction to the adrenaline crash. I leaned against a stack of boxes to catch my breath. One of the boxes on a nearby pallet had been damaged, its side caved in, the contents spilling out. Not medical supplies. Binders. Dozens of them. Thick, white, 3-ring binders. Each with a label on the spine. Subject C-12. Profile, domestic abuse survivor. Stimulus, recreated childhood home. Subject F-07. Profile, disgraced clergyman. Stimulus, confessional booth simulation. Subject D-21. Profile, combat veteran with PTSD. Stimulus, auditory battlefield recreation. I felt sick. I was going to throw up. It was a library of tailored nightmares, a catalog of broken people. My hand, shaking, reached for a binder that had fallen onto the floor. The label was simple. Stark. Subject A01. My heart stopped. It was me. My file. The story of my life, my fabricated life, bound in cheap plastic. I had to know. I had to see it in black and white. With trembling fingers, I opened the cover. The first page was a photo. A headshot. Underneath it, my name, my supposed age, my job as an architect. All the details they had fed me. The profile they had used. The narcissistic streak. The flicker of temper. Harding's words came rushing back. But there was one thing wrong. One terrible, impossible thing. That wasn't my face. The man in the picture had my build, my hair color, but his eyes were different. His jawline was sharper. It was a stranger, a man I had never seen before in my life. My mind refused to process it. It was a mistake, a typo. It had to be. My fingers, clumsy and numb, fumbled to turn the page. The next page was a single sheet, a memo, a few typed lines under the Omnigen letterhead. RE, subject A01, primary. Primary has become unstable following pre-trial simulations. Potential for total psychological collapse before Phase 1 implementation is high. Proceeding with backup. My eyes scanned down the page to the last line, a handwritten note in the same sharp, black ink as the one on the schematic. It felt like a needle sliding between my ribs. Subject A02, current, is to be prepped for the AN role. He is a viable candidate. The plastic binder cover felt slick and cheap in my hand. My fingers were numb. I couldn't feel the ridges of my own prints. The world had gone quiet, except for a high-pitched whine in my ears. Subject A01, primary. The words were a brand, searing themselves onto my brain. Beneath them, the face of a stranger. He looked like me. Sort of. Same dark hair. Same general height and build described in the text. But his face was all sharp angles where mine was rounder. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue. Mine were brown. I knew they were brown. It was one of the few things I thought I knew. He was a ghost wearing a cheap imitation of my skin. Unstable. Potential for total psychological collapse, the words referred to him. A01. The primary. The star of the show. And he'd broken down before the curtain even went up. So they brought in the understudy. Me, subject A02. The backup. The B-list player. The viable candidate. The whine in my ears faded, replaced by the rush of my own blood. For a second, I thought I would pass out. Then I thought I would scream. I didn't either. Something else took over. A feeling so cold and heavy, it settled in my bones like lead. It wasn't fear. I was past fear. Fear was for people who had something to lose. I had nothing. Not even a face. Not even a designation that was truly my own. This was something else. A pure, clean, distilled rage. It was the insult of it all. The efficiency. The detached, corporate language. Viable candidate. Like I was a piece of hardware they'd pulled off a shelf. They hadn't just stolen my past. They had erased the very idea that I was unique. I was a spare part. Replaceable. And that changed everything. I closed the binder. The snap of the plastic was loud in the silence. My hand, my good hand, was no longer shaking. It was a fist. The pain in my other arm was a distant fire, fuel for the furnace now roaring inside me. I was done being the rat. I was done being the subject. My eyes scanned the storage room, pallets, boxes, my file on the floor, liabilities, assets. That's how they saw the world. I needed an asset of my own. My gaze landed on it, bolted to a concrete support pillar, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a fire extinguisher, heavy, steel, painted a defiant, angry red. I walked over to it, my steps sure. I unlatched it from its cradle. The weight was a shock, solid, real, a 10-pound cylinder of compressed violence. It felt good in my hand. Not a tool for escape. A weapon. I wasn't looking for the exit anymore. I was looking for them. The corridor outside the storage room was a long, straight shot of sterile white. The lockdown was total. Not a single door was open. I picked a direction and started walking, the extinguisher held tight against my hip. My footsteps echoed, a steady, rhythmic beat, a war drum. I passed more stacks of binders. I couldn't stop myself from looking. The labels were a litany of human misery. Subject G14. Profile. Acrophobe with vertigo. Stimulus. Glass floor simulation. Subject K03. Profile. Pathological guilt complex. Stimulus. Reenactment of fatal car accident. Each one was a life, boiled down to a weakness, a pressure point to be exploited for their sick little show. A library of custom-built hells. My resolve hardened. This place needed to burn. The hallway ended. To the left and right, more identical sealed corridors. But straight ahead, there was something else. Something that didn't fit. It was a door. But not like the others. Not a heavy, electronically locked slab of steel. It was a simple, flat metal door. Gray. Scuffed around the handle. The kind of service door you'd see in the back of a grocery store. It felt out of place. Too mundane for this high-tech prison. I remembered the blueprint I saw, the one with the false exit. I'd scanned it quickly, but I'd scanned it well. This door hadn't been on it. This door wasn't part of the maze. This was backstage. I walked toward it, my sneakers silent on the polished floor. I held the extinguisher ready. I reached the door and stopped, listening. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. Nothing, not a hum, not a footstep, not a whisper. A dead, absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. The kind that means a room is either empty or holding its breath, waiting for you. This was it, the only path that wasn't on their map. I didn't hesitate. I didn't have time for doubt. I took a step back, gripped the extinguisher with both hands, the pain in my bad arm flaring into a white-hot scream. I ignored it. I swung. Clang! The sound was explosive, A raw metal scream that shattered the silence. It rang in my teeth. The door dented, the handle mechanism crunching. I swung again, aiming for the same spot. Clang! The lock gave. A sharp crack, and the door shuddered inward a few inches. I dropped the extinguisher, grabbed the edge with my good hand, and pulled. It scraped open, revealing a new corridor. This was different. The air was cool and damp, smelling of wet concrete and mildew. The walls were rough, unfinished cinder block. A single line of caged bulbs ran down the low ceiling, casting a weak, yellow light. Exposed pipes and conduits snaked along the walls like metal veins. This was the facility's guts. I stepped through, pulling the door shut behind me. It didn't latch. It didn't matter. I was off their grid. I picked up the extinguisher. My weapon. My key. And then I heard it. A soft hiss. It started from a vent right above my head, then another from further down the corridor, and another. I looked up. Small, grated vents, set flush into the ceiling every 20 feet. A fine, white mist was beginning to pour from them, catching the yellow light, swirling in the air. It had a smell, faint, not smoke, not chemicals. It was sweet, cloying, like flowers and ether. They knew the second I broke that lock, this wasn't a way out. It was a fly trap. The gas wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant to put me to sleep, to drag me back to my test chamber, reset the board, and start the game all over again. No, not again. I dropped my head, covered my mouth and nose with the crook of my good arm, and held my breath. My lungs burned from the last run, but I forced them to obey. I started running. My feet slapped on the damp concrete. The corridor stretched out before me, a long, narrow tunnel rapidly filling with a disorienting white fog. My lungs were screaming. Black spots danced at the edge of my vision. I needed to breathe. I had to. I gasped, and the sweet taste filled my mouth. My head swam. My legs felt heavy, like I was running through water. Up ahead, through the haze, a light. Brighter, whiter, a doorway, and two figures standing in it. The gas was making them shift and blur, but as I got closer they resolved into sharp, terrible clarity. They were dressed in black tactical gear from head to toe. Body armor, heavy boots, helmets with dark visors. They held rifles, held them at low ready like they did this every day. They weren't security guards. They were soldiers. There was no way past them, no way back. The gas was thick behind me, my lungs already full of it. My body was screaming at me to lie down, to sleep. But the cold rage was still there, a single, hot point in the fog of my mind. It was them or me. I didn't stop running. I didn't slow down. I let out a roar, a raw, ragged sound, torn from the bottom of my burning lungs. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a promise. The guards shifted, raising their rifles. Too slow. I was on them. I swung the fire extinguisher in a wide, horizontal arc, putting every ounce of my weight, my rage, my desperation into it. The first guard tried to bring his rifle up to block. The heavy steel cylinder hit the barrel, snapping it with a sharp crack, and continued on its path. It connected with his helmet. The sound was not a clang. It was a wet, heavy crunch. He went down without a sound, a heap of black gear on the concrete. The second guard was faster. He didn't try to block. He took a step back, his rifle coming up, the muzzle, a perfect black circle, aimed directly at my chest. I heard the click of the safety being switched off. Sharp. Final. I was out of momentum, out of breath. My arms were weak. It was over. The door behind him flew open. A shape, a blur of motion came through. It was a woman. The woman from the monitors. Subject B. Her face was smudged with dirt, her hair a wild tangle. Her eyes were wide, blazing with the same desperate fire I felt in my own gut. In her hand, she held a length of rebar, its end sharpened to a crude point. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She lunged forward and drove the sharpened steel bar into the gap between the guard's helmet and his body armor. There was a soft, thick sound, a gurgle from the guard's throat. His rifle wavered. He looked down at the rebar sticking out of his neck, a look of profound surprise on his face. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed forward. And then there was silence. Just the hiss of the gas and the sound of our own ragged breathing. She stood over the body, the rebar still in her hand, dripping. She looked at me. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was no fear in them, no relief. Just a wild, animal intensity, a question, a statement. We were out of the maze, and we were just getting started. The hissing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was thick, heavy, filled with the smell of sweet gas and the coppery tang of fresh blood. 2 bodies in black armor lay twisted on the concrete floor. One with a caved-in helmet, one with a piece of rebar sticking out of its neck. I stood there, heaving, the fire extinguisher a lead weight in my hands. The woman stood across from me. Her name was, I didn't know her name. Subject B, a file on a screen. Now she was here, flesh and blood, her chest rising and falling in ragged bursts. The rebar in her hand dripped a slow, steady rhythm onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. We stared at each other. A long second stretched into an eternity. No words were needed. We saw the same thing in each other's eyes. A wild, desperate thing that had been caged and was now, finally, loose. We were not subjects. We were survivors. Then, a new sound. A distant, angry wail. A lockdown alarm. It clawed its way through the damp air, growing louder. She glanced down the long cinder block corridor we had just opened. Her eyes darted back to me. Her voice was a raw whisper, barely a sound. They're coming. That broke the spell. My blood turned to ice, then to fire. I dropped the dented extinguisher. The clang echoed down the hall. It was too heavy. Too slow. She didn't wait for me. She turned and ran, her worn sneakers slapping against the wet floor. I was right behind her. We ran. The corridor was a straight, yellow-lit tube of concrete and pipe. The alarm screamed behind us, a promise of what was chasing us. Ahead, a heavy metal fire door slammed shut with a deafening boom. Then another to our left. They were sealing the facility, boxing us in. This way, she yelled, her voice echoing. She didn't slow. She veered right into a smaller, darker intersecting hallway. I followed without thinking. The air grew thicker here, tasting of dust and rust. Another door slammed ahead. And another. A rhythm of steel on steel, counting down our last seconds. They weren't just locking doors. They were building the walls of our tomb around us. Live. She skidded to a stop in front of a plain wooden door. It was unlocked. A small metal plate on it read, Janitorial. She threw her shoulder into it. It burst open into a small, cramped closet. The smell of bleach and old mops hit me like a wall. She scrambled inside, pulling me in after her. She shut the door, plunging us into near darkness. Only a sliver of yellow light from the hallway bled from under the door. We stood there, panting, our backs against a wall of metal shelves. Outside, the sounds changed. The alarms died. The silence that came back was different. It was alive. We heard the scuff of boots on concrete. Dozens of them. They were moving fast, methodically. Then, a new sound. A sharp, guttural bark. Then another. Dogs. My stomach twisted. The woman, May, wasn't listening. Her eyes were adjusting to the gloom. She was scanning the small room. Her gaze landed on the wall opposite the door. Tacked to a corkboard, yellowed and curled at the edges, was a piece of paper. I could just make it out. It was a schematic. Here, she breathed, her finger tracing a line on the old paper. Not on their system. Old. The drains? I leaned closer. Blue lines on faded paper. A map of the facility's guts. It showed a main access point, right here. In this room. A round circle, with the letters M.A. on it. She pointed to the floor. There, half hidden under a stack of dirty rags, was a round cast-iron manhole cover. Hope was a stupid, dangerous thing. But a tiny spark of it flickered in my chest. A way out they didn't control. A path they didn't build. Then the sounds from the hall got closer. The heavy tread of boots stopped right outside our door. The dogs were going crazy, snarling and scratching at the wood. They knew we were in here. A deep voice barked an order. "Breach on 3." There was no more time. No choice. She was already on her knees, kicking the rags away, her fingers searching for a grip on the manhole cover. I dropped beside her, my own hands clawing at the recessed iron handle. It was cold. It wouldn't budge. 1. The voice from outside was calm, professional. We pulled. The iron scraped against the concrete, a grinding sound that grated on my teeth. My shoulder screamed in protest. I ignored it. 2. The dogs were a frenzy of barking. I could hear the click of safeties on their rifles. "Pull," May grunted. We gave it everything. With a final, agonizing shriek of metal, the cover slid aside, revealing a black, gaping hole. The smell that rose from it was foul, a mix of sewage and chemical waste that made my eyes water. 3! The door exploded inward, ripped from its hinges. Light and noise flooded the tiny closet. I didn't look back. I swung my legs into the hole, my feet finding a rung on a rusted metal ladder. The iron was slick with slime. May was right behind me. "Go!" I scrambled down into the darkness. It was a straight drop. 10 feet! 15! My feet hit freezing, knee-deep water with a filthy splash. It soaked my jeans instantly. A disgusting, cold shock. May landed next to me a second later. Above us, the circle of light from the closet was filled with black shapes. Flashlight beams stabbed down, cutting through the dark. "They're in the tunnels! Sector Gamma! All units converge!" The voice echoed, distorted by the pipe. We didn't wait. We turned and plunged into the tunnel. The darkness was absolute. The only sound was our frantic sloshing through the foul water and the shouting from above. The round tunnel was just tall enough to stand in, the curved concrete walls slick with God knows what. We ran blind. My hands were out in front of me, brushing against the slimy walls. My feet kept slipping on the uneven floor beneath the water. Behind us, I heard a metallic clang. They were coming down the ladder. "They're coming!" I gasped, the words tasting like filth. Up ahead, a faint light. A junction. The main tunnel branched in 2 directions. "Left or right? A 50-50 chance." "Left!" May shouted, grabbing my arm and yanking me. We splashed into the new tunnel. The sounds of our pursuers grew fainter. Maybe we'd made the right choice. Maybe we had a chance. Then, a beam of light sliced through the darkness from above. It came from a grated opening in the ceiling of the tunnel, 10 yards ahead of us. The light pinned us, painting us in stark white against the black water. "Got them! They're in the western conduit!" A voice roared from directly above. The beam tracked us as we ran. It was like being on a stage. More beams joined the first, coming from other grades further down. They crisscrossed in front of us, a lattice of light. They weren't just chasing us, they were watching, directing the hunt. The water churned behind us. They were closing the distance. Their splashing was heavier, faster than ours. I could hear the dogs again, their barks echoing in the confined space, sounding like monsters from a nightmare. My lungs burned. My legs were numb with cold and exhaustion. Every step was a struggle against the sucking pull of the sludge. This was it. There was nowhere to run. Then I saw it, just past the next set of light beams. A ladder, another ladder, bolted to the wall, leading up to another manhole cover. "There!" I yelled, pointing. It was our only shot. We poured on the last of our strength, a desperate, final sprint through the intersecting beams of light. The shouts from above were a roar now. The splashing from behind was right at our heels. I could almost feel their breath on my neck. I reached the ladder first. I scrambled up the slick rungs, my hands slipping, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. I put my shoulder to the manhole cover above. It was heavy. I pushed. It gave an inch. May was at the bottom of the ladder. "Hurry!" she screamed. I gave it one last, desperate shove. The cover tilted, scraping open. Cool night air washed over my face. The smell of pine and wet earth. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever smelled. I hauled myself up and out, rolling onto a carpet of damp leaves and pine needles. I was in a forest. Tall trees surrounded us, their dark shapes stark against a gray, moonless sky. I was out. I was free. I turned and reached down into the hole. "Come on!" May's hand grabbed mine. I pulled her up. She scrambled out, collapsing onto the ground beside me, gasping for air. We lay there for a second, two filthy, half-drowned creatures on the forest floor, sucking in the clean air. We made it. She pushed herself up to her knees, a wild, triumphant grin spreading across her dirt-smudged face. She looked at me, her eyes shining in the dim light. That's when I saw it. A tiny, perfect circle of red light. It appeared on the center of her chest, a single, defiant ruby against her dark, wet shirt. My brain didn't have time to process what it was, what it meant. A sharp crack split the night. It wasn't loud. It was precise. Final. May's grin vanished. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with a look of profound surprise. A small, dark hole appeared right where the red dot had been. She made a soft sound, a little gasp, like she'd just remembered something she'd forgotten. Then her knees buckled, and she fell forward onto the leaves. My fingers dug into the fabric of her shirt, into the damp, cooling flesh beneath. The night air was sharp in my lungs, smelling of pine and death. My mind was a white screen of noise. The crack of the rifle, the look of surprise on her face. Her name was May. I think her name was May. It didn't matter now. Names were for the living. Sounds returned, shouting from the hole we'd climbed out of, crashing in the underbrush not far off. They were coming. They were all around us. I couldn't leave her here. Not for them. My arms went under her shoulders. I pulled. She was heavier than I thought. A dead weight that dragged through the wet leaves, leaving a dark trail I couldn't see but knew was there. Branches whipped at my face, but I didn't feel them. All I felt was the unnatural stillness of her body. Into a thicket of ferns and shadows, I let her down gently, her head lolled to the side. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. I reached out a shaking hand and closed them. The skin of her eyelids was still warm. A wave of something hot and bitter rose in my throat. It wasn't just grief. It was rage. Pure, animal rage. They didn't just kill her. They took her triumph away. That wild grin. They shot it right off her face. A beam of light cut through the trees to my left. A voice called out, closer now. "Spread out! Check the perimeter!" I didn't look back. I turned and ran. I ran like the hounds of hell were on my heels, because they were. I ran without direction, fueled by nothing but terror and that burning rage. The forest was a black maze of trunks and roots. I stumbled, fell, my hands hitting the cold, damp earth. I scrambled back up, tasting dirt and blood in my mouth. My lungs burned. The filth from the sewer, cold and heavy in my jeans, chafed my skin raw. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, swallowed by the trees. Or maybe I was just outrunning them. It didn't matter, I just kept running. Running until my legs were numb stumps. Running until my vision blurred and the trees became a spinning vortex of black. I broke through a final line of trees and collapsed onto something hard and gritty. Asphalt. The rough surface scraped my cheek. I lay there, gasping, my body a single, screaming ache. The world was pitching and rolling. I was on the shoulder of a road, a highway. In the distance, the twin lights of a vehicle approached, growing larger, brighter. I tried to push myself up. My arms gave out. I fell back, my head hitting the pavement with a dull thud. The lights washed over me, pinning me like an insect. Then, the squeal of air brakes. A hiss that sounded too much like the gas in the lab. My whole body seized. The roar of a diesel engine idled beside me. A heavy door creaked open. Boots crunched on the gravel shoulder. "Jesus Christ, son, you all right?" The voice was deep, gravelly, normal. It was the most alien sound I had ever heard. I rolled over, blinking up at a massive silhouette against the glare of the headlights. A big man in a trucker hat and a flannel jacket. I tried to speak. A croak came out. I coughed, the foul taste of the sewer rising again. "Whoa, easy there," he said. He knelt down, smelling of stale coffee and cigarettes. "You in a wreck?" I didn't see no car. I just shook my head. Words were impossible. My throat was raw. My brain was broken. He stared at me for a long second. At my face. At my clothes, soaked in black water and God knows what else. "Look, I ain't calling the cops if you don't want me to. But you can't stay here. You'll get yourself killed." He stood up. "I'm headed east. Closest town with a bus station is about 30 miles out. You can get warm at least. Colin." He offered a hand. I stared at it. It was calloused and real. I took it. He hauled me to my feet like I weighed nothing. I stumbled, my legs still screaming, and he steadied me. Climbing into the cab of the semi was like stepping into another universe. The air was warm, smelling of pine tree air freshener and old vinyl. The CB radio crackled with quiet static. On the dash, a little hula girl bobblehead swayed gently. It was all so painfully, unbelievably normal. He slammed his door, and the cab was an island of light and sound in the vast darkness. "Name's Earl," he said, grinding the truck into gear. The whole cab shuddered as we pulled back onto the highway. I huddled in the passenger seat, shivering. My teeth chattered, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet cab. "Damn, you're soaked clean through," Earl said, not looking at me. He cranked the heat up. Hot, dry air baked my face. "There's a blanket behind your seat." I fumbled around and found it. A worn, wool army blanket. It smelled of dust. I wrapped it around my shoulders. The shivering didn't stop. It was coming from inside now. We drove in silence for a while. The yellow lines of the highway slid by, one after another, a hypnotic rhythm. My mind kept replaying it. The red dot. The crack. The look on her face. Drip. 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 "You running from something, son?" Earl asked, his eyes on the road. I flinched. The question hit me like a physical blow. "Easy," he said quickly. "Don't matter to me. Seen a lot of folks on this road. Most of them are running from something. A bad debt, a bad marriage, a bad memory. Just so long as you ain't running from the law in a way that gets me involved." I managed to shake my head again. "All right then," he grunted, and that was that. He turned on the radio. A country song about a broken heart and a pickup truck filled the cab. It was the most insane thing I had ever heard. 30 miles felt like 1,000 years. When the lights of a truck stop finally appeared, a garish beacon of red and yellow, I felt a strange lurch of panic. This place was a refuge. Leaving it meant stepping back into what? Earl pulled into the massive parking lot. "Here you go," he said. "Coffee shop's open 24/7. Restrooms are in there. Bus station is just across the street. First one leaves at 5 a.m. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "Get yourself some coffee, maybe some dry socks." I stared at the money. I stared at him. "Go on, take it," he said, pressing it into my hand. "Looks like you need it more than me." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a pathetic, jerky motion. I opened the door and climbed down. The cold air hit me again. "Hey, kid," Earl called out. I turned. "Whatever it is, good luck." Then he put the truck in gear and rumbled off into the darkness, leaving me alone under the buzzing neon sign. The $20 bill in my hand felt like a fake. I walked toward the glass doors of the convenience store, my own reflection, a filthy, shambling ghost walking with me. The store was bright and sterile. The air smelled of hot dogs and cleaning solution. A bored-looking kid behind the counter didn't even look up from his phone as I passed. I headed straight for the restroom sign. The bathroom was small, white-tiled, and reeked of bleach. I pushed the door shut and leaned against it, my heart hammering. I was safe. For a second. I turned to the sink and twisted the handle. Cold water gushed out. I splashed it on my face, again and again, trying to wash away the night. The water ran brown in the white basin. I scrubbed at my hands, at the grime under my nails. It felt like I was trying to scrub off my own skin. Then I made the mistake of looking up. I looked in the mirror. A stranger stared back at me. It was my face. I knew that, on some level. The shape of the eyes, the jawline, but it wasn't me. The eyes were hollowed out. Dark pools of fear and confusion. There was a fresh cut on the cheekbone, smeared with dirt. The hair was matted with filth. But it was more than that. I looked into those eyes and I saw nothing. No history. No memories. No past. Who was this person? No. Did I have a favorite color? Did I like movies? Did I have a mother? A father? Was there a life before the lab? Before the running? Or was I born in that sterile room? A thing created, not a person grown. The thought was a shard of ice in my gut. They hadn't just tried to kill my body, they had already killed my mind. The walls of the small bathroom seemed to press in on me. The air grew thick. I couldn't breathe. I braced my hands on the sink, my knuckles white. The face in the mirror copied the movement. A puppet. A shell. I had no idea who was pulling the strings. I stumbled out of the bathroom, back into the bright, clean store. I needed to get out. I needed air. That's when I saw the television. It was a small screen mounted near the ceiling, above the rows of cigarettes. A news program was on. The volume was low, but I could hear the anchor's calm, measured voice. And in local news, authorities have concluded their investigation into the tragic incident at the Omnifarm Research Facility just outside of town. My blood ran cold. I froze, standing between the chips and the beef jerky. On the screen, they showed a picture of the facility. Not the hellish concrete tomb I had escaped, but a clean, modern building from a brochure. Then, a picture of a man. Thin, nervous-looking, with glasses. The caption read, Daniel Miller, disgruntled employee. The incident, initially reported as a possible terrorist act, the anchor continued, her face a mask of professional sympathy, has now been ruled the result of a catastrophic gas leak, deliberately triggered by Miller, a lab technician who had recently been terminated. A photo of Dr. Lynn appeared on the screen. She was smiling. It was a corporate headshot, warm, professional, a complete lie. Miller, along with lead researcher Dr. Alana Lynn and the entire night shift staff, are presumed to have perished in the resulting explosion and fire. Officials have called it a tragic case of workplace violence and have officially closed the investigation. The world tilted. My stomach heaved. It was a story. A neat, clean, plausible story. A disgruntled employee. A gas leak. Everyone dead. Case closed. They had erased it all. They hadn't just locked the doors. They had burned the whole building to the ground, metaphorically. They had wiped the slate clean. They had wiped us clean. May. Me. All the others. We didn't exist. We were just collateral damage in a tidy news report. We were a loose end, and they had just snipped it shut. I turned and walked out of the store, a robot moving on dead legs. I didn't buy coffee. I didn't buy socks. The $20 bill was still clutched in my fist. It felt like blood money. Across the street, a bus was idling, its lights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Its destination was a glowing sign that meant nothing to me. It didn't matter. Any direction was better than here. I walked across the empty asphalt, up the steps, and dropped the crumpled 20 into the driver's hand. He grunted, not looking at me, and gave me back a handful of change. I didn't count it. The bus was nearly empty. A few sleeping figures were slumped in the back. I stumbled down the aisle and collapsed into a seat by the window. The bus pulled away from the curb with a hydraulic sigh, leaving the truck stop behind. Leaving everything behind. I was free. And I was completely, utterly alone. A ghost in a machine. My life wasn't my own, my face wasn't my own, my memories were a black hole. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the dark landscape slide by. What now? Where do I go? Who do I become? My eyes drifted across the aisle. There was a man sitting there. Just an ordinary man, maybe 40, with thinning hair and a tired, frayed look about him. He hadn't been there when I got on. He must have been one of the sleeping figures. He was awake now. He seemed agitated. He was hunched over, staring down at something in his lap. He had just pulled it from a worn, hardcover book with a faded blue cover. It was a piece of paper. Folded and refolded so many times the creases were soft, like fabric. He spread it open on his knees. His hands were shaking. Even from across the aisle, in the dim light of the bus, I could see it. It wasn't a printout. It wasn't a page from an atlas. It was a map, drawn by hand. Blue ink on yellowed paper. A network of lines, strange symbols, and locations marked with small, precise X's. The man stared at it, his face a mask of confusion and deep, gnawing fear. He looked lost. He looked hunted. He looked like he was at the beginning of a very long, very dark road. My heart stopped. The air left my lungs. I stared at him, at the book, at the map, and I knew. I knew with a certainty that was more real than my own name. The cycle wasn't over. It was just starting again.